Let's rank the worst deaths in human history with this tier list, some of which are wild, some of which were weird as heck. Pope Adrian IV. Well, Nicholas Breakspere by birth was the only English person to be a pope. A pretty Viking last name for a pope, to be honest. On the 1st of September, 1159, he was enjoying his meal with wine when he choked. Did foot get stuck in his mouth? Did he not chew properly? No. Witnesses at that time said that they saw a fly, either in the wine or rocketed to his mouth when he was taking a drink. Of all the ways this dude could have died, he choked on a fly. You know what's worse than that? Dying from laughing at your own joke. Ask Chrysippus here. I mean, it was 815 years too early before the Heimlich maneuver got invented, so he just choked there. With a fly in his mouth, everyone didn't know what to do. And dead. End scene. But some historians actually think this wasn't the case. They think that Pope Adrian IV died from quinsy, a leveled-up, powered-up, one-upped version of tonsillitis. They also think that the fly was just a mere coincidence, so I can put his death in this video. It was close to impossible to treat quinsies in the 10th century. Simply because the meta then was if you feel something bad anywhere in your body, you'll get a hole drilled in your skull. Doesn't matter what he died from. Adrian IV had 5 years of pope time. After the fly put him in a rear naked choke, there were wild things that happened. This guy's supporters battled this guy's supporters. The church was divided and they turned down for what? For this guy to be the pope. Good start. You go to F tier. Death by fly is just stupid. It could be a good heavy metal band name at best. Frank Devereaux. Frank Devereaux was a hunter, a poacher, or whatever job kills animals for food and leather. On the 4th of September, 1883, he went into the woods near Sheboygan, Michigan to hunt animals. This wood was full of black bears roaming around in their communities. Frank happened to have crossed paths with one of them, so yeah, tough luck. But sit down. Liam Neeson fighting wolves. Frank went out fighting like the Giga Chad he was. He literally stood toe-to-toe with the bear. About a radius of 20 feet of the battlefield's ground was damaged because of how Frank fought the bear. It was believed that my guy only had his hunting knife and a secondary weapon. But these things were enough against the bear's weight and claws. The fight continued until both of them stopped. I mean, both of them died, so of course they'd stop. When the bear's body was found, it was dead. Same goes with Frank's. But Frank's body was in a more catastrophic state. His body got mutilated, deep wounds in the shape of the bear claws and teeth. Good game, Frank Devereaux. This one belongs to A tier. He might have died, but he died killing the one that killed him too. The perfect battle ended in a draw. John Jones. This John Jones is still alive and kicking, literally. This John Jones is not. It's because 26-year-old John Jones was an amateur spelunker, a guy who studies caves by exploring them. In the 24th of November 2009, they went to the Nutty Putty Cave. You've probably heard of this story, but let me tell it to you anyway. The cave is filled with narrow passageways that are not meant for claustrophobic people, primarily because people with claustrophobia would sweat and shake and breathe fast and get dizzy in these places. I mean, have you seen the passages in Nutty Putty? It's this small in the entrance. There are more smaller ones on the inside. John, his brother Josh, and some other family members tagged along for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving? What? Really? Thanksgiving? I mean, no judgment. John had some caving experience when he was a kid, but this time, he was in med school, and he hadn't done this in such a long time. So he may not be dog water, but he sure had some skill gap. When the group made it into the cave, they tried to go to the part known as the birth canal. It's a tight one, but if you have experience, you can tight through it. Josh went in first, but to his mistake, he slithered into the wrong canal. The tunnel was never listed, but it was narrower than the one they intended to go to. When John went in, he got stuck in a downward slope that was tighter than a room with Gorlock the Destroyer in it. To make matters worse, he was upside down. The space that John was able to move in was only a 25 by 45 centimeter space, or 10 by 18 inches in eagle measurement, like this. It was impossible to move because each move he does puts him deeper and deeper in the passageway. It gets tighter every time even. Josh immediately went out of the cave to call for help. More than 100 rescuers went to the Nutty Putty Cave to try and free John up. Because the cave was unwelcoming to huge amount of people, having 100 men didn't really help that much for John. The rescue team tried a whole lot of ways to save Johnny. Rope and pulley? Didn't work. His angle was awkward, his weight was in the way, the tunnel was narrow. They also tried to make the gap he's in a little large with drills and chisels. Again, didn't work. It's too tight, so there was only so much those tools could do. They were big, the gap was too small. While the Nutty Putty Cave is predominantly made up of an easily crumbling type of rock called hydrothermal gypsum, The place John was stuck in wasn't. Not even a small tool like a ball-peen hammer could help with anything. Their last resort was to cut John's legs, but that had more chance of him dying than living. If you cut his legs after being compressed that tight for that long, boom. A shock, cardiac arrest, and dead. After more than 24 hours of trying to sort this massive problem, John was getting worse. He was in an almost upside-down position. The blood was rushing to his head, so the heart went boom, boom, boom twice as hard to maintain blood cycle through the body. There was a point that the rescuers got him to move a few inches. Hey-ho, what do you know? The pulley system broke. John slipped back to where he originally was. John talked to his family and rescuers the entire time. But after 27 hours of trying to remove an awkwardly positioned man in a literal tight spot, John Jones died from cardiac arrest. He died on the 25th of November, 2009. John couldn't be recovered, and it was decided not to try anything anymore because it was too risky even after he died. So the Nutty Putty Cave was permanently closed as it became John's grave and memorial site. Having an entire cave as your tomb is both sad and awesome at the same time. Mostly the sad one. Because of that, I'm gonna put it at B tier. Giles Corey. Giles was from England. He moved to a village in Salem to be a farmer. Correction, a big farmer. He didn't get big by being an honest man. Has anyone ever been? In 1675, he was fined for beating a servant to the next life. Kind of why he's on this list. When people got so pressed about possible witches in Salem, they did so many witch trials in 1692, most of which were either injustice, popular opinion-based, biased, or stupid. One of the victims of these trials was Giles's wife, Martha. Martha was accused of witchcraft, something that Giles was so supportive of. His reason was because Martha was reading strange books. Oh my goodness! Women can read! She's a witch! Hey Martha, do you remember what Giles said to bring for the party? You think witch! Ouch! What's with that flower? It stabbed me. I read that in the encyclopedia. It's called a rose. Roses have thorns. Alright, that's it. You're coming with us. Another reason Giles backed the idea was because she stopped him from praying. Okay, you don't impose your beliefs on someone who doesn't have the same belief as yours. That's wrong. But come on. Witch trial? Really? I mean, for a 15th century Salem where Jesus is like the center of the universe? Sure, but witch trial? Cuckoo in the head. But Giles immediately took back his support. That wasn't good. He just put a target on his back. Martha was arrested on the 19th of March, 1692. The husband was arrested literally a month after. It wasn't that hard to put something on him considering Giles's past. All the people had to do was get the stories of little girls claiming they saw witches, and they'd buy it. Let's just say what he did before. Well, it bit him in the ass. Shouldn't have killed the man, Giles. And now the Bonnie and Clyde of Salem were both arrested. Giles was put on trial in September 1692, just for formality, because no one actually won a witch trial as the defendant. When the judge asked him what his plea would be, guess what he answered? I'll give you 3 seconds. Nothing. He pleaded nothing because he just stood there and said nothing in an act called standing mute. There's at least 3 types of pleas, but he chose none of them. Now the court can't move on with the trial. Smart move, brave move, risky move. They need him to plead something. So to force it out of him, the court Latinized the witch out of Giles and imposed peine forte et dure. It was this torture method where the defendant, who we know will never win the trial, will be pressed with heavy stones until they plead something or die. Giles went through this on the 17th of September, 1692, on a field just beside the Salem jail. He was laid on the ground, butt naked. A board was put on his body, and the rocks were placed on that board. Sheriff George Corwin and his lackeys kept pressing and pressing Giles to say something. Well, he said something, just not what they wanted to hear. It was more weight, so they continued putting more rocks on the board. By the next day, the weight was just so much his body gave out. Giles's tongue was swollen and is showing out his mouth because of the pressure. Sheriff Hatewitch here forced back in with a cane. Giles never screamed nor cried throughout this entire session. No plea until he died. This belongs in S tier because it was a smart choice too. Without a plea, his properties can't be taken by Massachusetts, and it can be passed down to generations. Plus, he saved his dignity by taking back what he said about his wife. Took tons of rocks, tanked it, but never took a knee. Hell of a man. Conorak Synthesomphone. Conorak Synthesomphone was a 14-year-old Laotian American boy. On the 26th of May 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer kidnapped Conorak. Although this wasn't the first time the two saw each other. 3 years before, Jeffrey Dahmer hit on Conorak's brother, Somsak. He enticed Somsak to his apartment to pose for money. You know what pose I'm meaning? It's Jeffrey Dahmer. What else could I possibly have to explain to you? The kid thought that it was a chance for financial freedom for his family. Nope, it wasn't. Jeffrey roofied Konarak and experimented on him. He drilled a hole in the kid's head and injected hydrochloric acid directly into Konarak's brain. It was said that he did this to make a submissive zombie out of the child. It was amazing that Konarak even got conscious again and escaped Jeff's apartment. He walked the streets naked, zooted, wounded, and trepanated. If you saw this child walking around with a Phineas gauge in his head, you'd be concerned. That's what 3 women who saw Konarak did. Call 911. This is Officer John Balserzak, and this is Joseph Gabrish. They got to where the kid was. But holy crap. A wild Jeffrey Dahmer appeared out of nowhere. Jeffrey used convince. It was highly effective. How? Dahmer just told the cops that the kid was his 19-year-old boyfriend who got wasted drunk. A naked child with a hole in his head was wasted. Yes, and the cops bought that crap. They returned Konarak to Dahmer, even if the women kept telling the officers that what Dahmer had with him was an injured child. Doesn't matter. Follow the cops or you'll get kneed on the neck. Even when Dahmer had records of being a predator, he got the kid. The officers didn't know any better of this man's past. The moment the two were back in the apartment, Dahmer injected more acid to the kid's brain. Well, that killed Konarak. But it's Jeffrey Dahmer. He wouldn't just kill a kid. What do you think Jeffrey Dahmer was? A predator with some kind of cannibalistic instances. Yes, he is. He ripped Konarak's body apart, limb by limb like some Thanksgiving turkey, and stored some parts with another man, Tony Hughes. He got Dahmered just 3 days before Konarak. Jeffrey Dahmer got arrested on the 22nd of July, 1991, when his apartment was searched. Boom. 11 bodies stored, and then Evan Peters got a series out of it. Since this is a Dahmer-related death, I'm inclined to put it at S tier, but because it's Jeffrey Dahmer, I'll go put it at B tier for boys. Gheorghe Dosa. Gheorghe Dosa was the leader of the New Crusade versus the Ottoman Empire in 1514 from the Kingdom of Hungary, today's Transylvania.
Blah, blah, blah.
Fighting, I won't get into that. Basically, Gheorghe's rule was overthrown by a stronger army. Not much of an army if you have 20,000 peasants with you. Gheorghe was sentenced to death in a mocking way. All the things he wanted to see in the world, he'll get it. This was done to warn anyone that if they try going against the law back then, they die. Gheorghe was forced to sit on a throne. Nice, a king. But the throne was scorching hot, so his ass and his back were burned. Then a red iron crown was put on his head. Wait, that's not red naturally? Then what's making it red? It was scorching hot too? Well then, he just got the Jesus crown treatment. A scepter was in his hand. Of course, that one was hot as well. Okay, physical torture, done. Time for the mental one. 9 of Gheorghe's rebels were starved before his execution. The leader of this rebel group was his brother Gurgly. No, please don't kill my brother, said Gheorghe, thinking that would work. Okay, we won't, said the guards. Nah, just kidding. They didn't say that. They boom sliced Gurgly in 3 parts. Then the rest of the rebels were forced to eat Gurgly's body parts like he was a mere Fritz. If you don't eat it and you were a rebel, you'll get sliced too and be a part of the feast. After a few hours, Gheorghe eventually died. Who wouldn't? Hot everything is basically hell. He was cut in 4 pieces and these parts were sent across Hungary as a warning. They kill as a warning to not be killed. Very cartel. Now this one is S tier. Not only did he die brutally, so did his brother. Gheorghe's was just a slower, more brutal way to go. Ishikawa Goemon. While this is leaning towards a myth more than something that actually happened, there's no way the Japanese didn't come up with this myth and didn't pull through with doing it. Ishikawa Goemon was Japan's version of Robin Hood, so you can call him Rabbing Hoodo. Because he thought the end justified his means, he'd be able to get away with stealing from wealthy feudal lords and merchants. Warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi didn't like thieves, or criminals in general. Ishikawa tried the merciful way of stopping someone from hating you, by killing him. Didn't work. Ninja Boy got caught by one of Toyotomi's generals, Sengoku Hidehisa. Time for the punishment. On the 8th of October 1594, Ishikawa was sentenced to be boiled alive in oil. No rotisserie, no baked, deep fried. It was for the public to see in Kamogawa, Kyoto. Assault on the wound was that Ishikawa's 5-year-old son Ichiro was the child who would die with him in that pot. The hell did little man do? Nothing. He did nothing. Toyotomi was not very mindful, nor very demure of Ishikawa. He thought the entire family was a threat to be Robin Hood in the future, so he took care of that. When the two got put in the pot, Ishikawa put his son above his head to keep him safe, even while Ishikawa's lower body's turning into chicharron. Didn't take long for Ishikawa to die and drop his child, and boom. Fried father-son platter. This one goes to S tier too. His death was the definition of gory, what a hell of a way to die. Plus, the kid. William the Conqueror or William the First. Doesn't matter, it was the same person. See, in 1087, William was 59. That was way past the life expectancy of someone from that time, which was 30 to 40 years, simply because of how limited the range of their medical capability was. Reaching that age was already a good feat. What's not a good thing was he was in the middle of war, leading an army to fight King Philip I of France. On the 15th of August, William's horsey reared while he was attacking Mons. Newton's first law made William go to the saddle pommel really bad. This is a saddle pommel. If you're sitting on that horse and hit your body there at high speed until you stop, you may live, but not for long without proper medical care. Exactly what happened to William. Internal damages, blah blah blah, all that because the pommel pressed his stomach. That ripped his intestines. A few weeks later, let's check on William. Hello, William. How are ya? What is that? Is that gangrene? What's happening to you, man? William right here spent his last days in Rouen. He wasn't able to walk, he wasn't able to fight, he was there writing his last will already. As his lawyer, which for legal purposes is a joke. It says here that you, Robert Curthose, would get Normandy. It's not going to get wasted until Operation Overlord in 1944, so you're cool. Besides, the Normandy you have is in UK. That one's in France. It's not yours. Don't try to take it, or you'll end up like your father. William Rufus. You're the king. Congrats, kiddo. People will paint your descendant and surround his head with red. There'll be nothing you can do about it because you're dead by then. On the 9th of September, 1087, William's first death came. It just so happened that the Grim Reaper was hesitant to take him because of what was about to happen. The loyal servants he had when he was alive simply abandoned his body. The level of neglect was like a father getting milk. He was just there in Rouen, half naked and unembalmed. Eventually, William's body started decomposing as if Beethoven unwrote his pieces. His body was being transported to Abbaye aux Hommes in Caen for the burial. Using the Seine River might not have been the very best choice. It was hot, and it was perfect to decompose William's body faster. When they got to Caen, William was bloated as hell from gases by bacteria in his intestines, like Boomer from Left 4 Dead. The problems never seemed to end for William, even after death. A fire broke out. A man claimed stolen lands in the middle of the funeral. Let the man rest in peace, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. At this point, they should have just let William's body be eaten by vultures or maggots, I don't know. It's decaying for goddamn weeks. As they were putting William down to his stone sarcophagus, he didn't fit. His body was too swollen for it, and then the second death came. Workers forced his body into the sarcophagus, but his stomach just went boom. Since he's been decaying, whatever sprayed out of his stomach made everyone run out. It was that disgusting of a smell. Minus points for dying twice, minus points for a disgusting second death, minus points for dying from a tummy ache. It was a mid-death, but pretty brutal, so see it is. Bernd Jürgen Armando Brandes. This one is a little different than the rest. The other ones brutally died against their will. This guy, Bernd, a 43-year-old engineer from Berlin, freaking volunteered. This absolute masochist applied on a posting by Armin Maiwis on a site called Cannibal Cafe. Before Bernd Jürgen Armando Brandes came to his life, Armin was lost. He didn't find his food in the other people that applied for his posting. I mean, they were a match made in heaven. Armin is a 39-year-old computer technician who had childhood fantasies about being a cannibal. Bernd wants to watch himself die. Bernd even paid for Armin to eat him. That's what makes it crazy. Is this some BDSM kink you guys know? Please tell me. On the 9th of March 2001, the two met at Armin's farmhouse in Rothenburg. Bernd was ready. Right after going to the farmhouse, he popped a ton of painkillers and drank alcohol. Guys, I just read something. What the hell? Let me read it to you in my own interpretation. They had a ritual. Bernd asked Armin to chop his pee-pee off and cook it. What am I seeing right now? I feel unwell. Dude thinks he's Napoleon Bonaparte and I'm unwell. They both tried to eat the Tilly Willy Oh My Lord and Savior Magnus Carlsen, but the flesh was too hard for them to chew. Bernd was sad. That's something to be sad about? What? As if the next thing wasn't worse, which was to leave Bernd bleeding out in the tub. What about Armin, you might ask? Oh well, he's just out there in the living room watching Disney, probably singing,
Look for the Bare necessities, that simple bare necessities. There's a man in my tub and he's bleeding out of life.
Bernd went in and out of his wits and consciousness before Armin got tired and just stabbed him in the throat. Armin then carefully cut the body parts like how Gordon Ramsay fillets his fish, stored it in the freezer, and ate all of it in several months. The guy became a full-fledged cannibal after eating all of Bernd's fleshy weshy. He posted some more on the cannibal website. Unfortunately for him, some Austrian student looked deeper in Armin's archives and called the cops on him. He got arrested, sentenced for manslaughter, and now he works at the laundry. He also goes to church. Insert uncontrollable laughter here. Yeah, I meant to say that insert thing. But yeah, this might be brutal, but it could have been avoided. Had Bernd just logged off the website, cleared his cookies and cache, and looked for professional help. He needed one F tier, absolute F tier. It was also gross, so yucky. There are more people I can put in here, but I want to make content in more videos, so I'll make a part 2, hopefully 3, maybe 4, somewhere around 5, or whatever number. You might think you're too smart to die stupidly, but so did the emperor who became a human footstool, and the lawyer who threw himself out a window to prove a point. Death by fan club. Draco was the guy ancient Athens hired when they wanted laws so harsh that even shoplifting could get you killed. His legal code was so brutal, people joked it was written in blood, not ink. And yet, weirdly, the Athenians loved him for it. At some point around 600 BCE, Draco showed up at the Aeginetan Theater to give a speech. The crowd was hyped, too hyped. As a traditional sign of respect, people tossed their cloaks, tunics, and hats toward him. Except they didn't stop. Thousands of people, hundreds of layers, all raining down on one man. And Draco? Crushed. Yes, Draco, the original hardliner of Athenian law, was smothered to death under a pile of fan-thrown clothing. Not in battle, not in exile, just swallowed by a crowd of enthusiastic fashion donors. The exact number of garments? Unknown. But sources like the Suda, a Byzantine encyclopedia written centuries later, claim it was enough to bury him alive on the spot. He died right there in the theater, underneath what was basically the ancient world's version of a merch dump. There's no evidence they meant harm. This wasn't a mob. This was applause, ancient Greek style. Imagine being so respected for writing laws like, steal a cabbage, lose your life, that people kill you with a wool avalanche. Draco's death is still debated. Some historians think it's more legend than fact. But most agree the event reflects the way Athenians treated public figures with extreme emotion and zero crowd control. Whether or not every detail is accurate, one thing's clear. He didn't walk away from that standing ovation. The guy who made capital punishment cool again got the ultimate irony, taken out by a loving public too enthusiastic to realize they were holding a mass execution. With capes, history remembers him for his laws. But the real punchline? He died from getting too much love. Literally, death by turtle bomb. Aeschylus was a heavyweight in ancient Greek drama. He wrote over 70 plays, revolutionized stagecraft, and basically turned theater into something respectable. You could say he put tragedy on the map, just not the kind he ended up in. Around 455 BCE, Aeschylus was in Sicily, near the city of Gela. According to ancient writers like Pliny the Elder and Valerius Maximus, he died in one of the most ridiculous ways recorded in classical history. An eagle, looking for a rock to crack open a tortoise, spotted Aeschylus's bald head from above and thought, "That'll do." So it dropped the tortoise, right onto his skull. Ancient sources treated this as a real event. Pliny listed it in his Natural History, not as a joke, but as a bizarre truth. And while modern historians aren't totally sure it happened exactly this way, the story's been passed down for over 2,000 years, and it's always been told the same. Bald man, flying turtle, instant death. He was around 69. No one was attacking him. No plague, no poison. Just the worst game of bird bowling ever played. One moment you're minding your business under the Sicilian sun. The next, you're a myth in someone else's lunch plan. There's a tragic irony to it, too. Aeschylus spent his career writing about fate, destiny, and the gods toying with human lives. And in the end, his life got snuffed out by a bird's lunch delivery gone wrong. His plays like The Persians and Agamemnon wrestled with divine justice. His death wrestled with physics and very poor aim. Some say he avoided staying indoors because of a prophecy that he'd die by something falling on his head. If that part's true, it might be the one prediction that turned out accurate and unhelpful at the same time. So, while his words echoed through centuries of drama, it's the flying tortoise that kept him famous. No one quotes his scripts anymore, but everyone remembers his last scene, lights out, courtesy of one very confused eagle. Death by human furniture. Valerian was a Roman emperor. You'd think that meant power, wealth, armies, temples with your face on them. What it actually meant, at least for him, was ending up on all fours, so another man could mount a horse. In 260 CE, Valerian led a Roman army against Persian king Shapur I. Bold move. It did not go well. The battle at Edessa was a disaster. Valerian was captured alive, something that had never happened to a Roman emperor before, and Shapur made sure nobody ever forgot it. Historical accounts, including those from Lactantius and Persian rock reliefs at Nakshi Rustam, claim Shapur used Valerian as a personal footstool, not metaphorically, literally. Whenever he wanted to get on his horse, he called for Valerian. The emperor would kneel. Shapur would step on his back like a doormat. This wasn't a one-time humiliation. It was his daily routine. What made it worse was the propaganda. Persian inscriptions boasted of Shapur's victory over the Caesar of Rome, and carved reliefs showed the exact pose. Valerian kneeling beneath Shapur's foot, head bowed. It wasn't just domination, it was a performance piece. And it worked. Back in Rome, panic set in. Their emperor had become an exhibit. Loyalty wavered. Morale crumbled. A political crisis followed, with generals scrambling to control what was left. Valerian's capture wasn't just embarrassing, it cracked the myth that Rome couldn't be touched. It gets worse. After Valerian died, sources disagree on how. Shapur reportedly had his body skinned, stuffed with straw, and displayed in a Persian temple, like a hunting trophy, or an extremely unrelaxed beanbag chair. The Romans didn't get him back. No proper burial, no diplomatic exchange, just one deflated ex-emperor, permanently on display. Now, to be fair, some scholars think parts of this story were Roman PR, revenge gossip meant to smear the Persians. Maybe, but those Persian carvings show a man kneeling beneath Shapur's foot. They didn't exactly deny it. Valerian ruled the Roman Empire for 7 years. His face was on coins. He passed laws, commanded legions, and then he spent the rest of his life getting stepped on by a man who thought of him as a flesh-based Ottoman. That's not a fall from grace, it's a faceplant into it. So next time your boss dumps a surprise meeting on your lunch break, just remember, you're still not being used as a human stepladder by your geopolitical rival. Valerian was. And Rome never really lived that down. Death by dead guy bite. Sigurd Eysteinsson, better known as Sigurd the Mighty, was a Viking earl ruling the Orkney Islands in the late 9th century. He spent his career raiding, conquering, and collecting titles like Candy. By all accounts, he was feared, respected, and undefeated until he took battlefield recycling a bit too far. Around 892 CE, Sigurd picked a fight with Mile Brigte, the Buck-Toothed, a local noble from northern Scotland. Sigurd challenged him to a showdown. Both men agreed to bring 40 troops. Sigurd, being very on-brand, brought 80. He overwhelmed Brigte's forces, claimed victory, and because Viking pride had no off-switch, secured Brigte's head to his saddle as a grim trophy. He didn't just hang it there for show. He rode off with it bouncing against his leg like a grim pom-pom. Mid-ride, the jaw shifted. One of Brigte's famously large teeth scraped Sigurd's calf. Just a little cut. Nothing heroic. But infections in the 9th century didn't need much of an invitation. Viking medicine wasn't exactly known for subtlety. Treatments ranged from moss-stuffed wounds to heated iron and optimistic prayers. No antiseptics, no antibiotics. You got a cut, you rolled the dice. And if the gods were feeling petty that day, tough. Even something as small as a scratch could go sideways fast, especially when that scratch came from a decomposing head-riding shotgun across the highlands. By the time anyone noticed swelling, it was already too late. Fever, sepsis, game over. Sigurd might have survived the battlefield, but he didn't stand a chance against medieval bacteria. Within days, Sigurd was dead. The man who couldn't be stopped by swords, fire, or entire villages was undone by one rogue incisor from beyond the grave. Our main source is the Orkneyinga saga, written about 300 years later. Sure, it reads like Viking gossip, but historians haven't found anything better to contradict it. And given the amount of weird stuff Vikings did on purpose, this story's almost reasonable. Whether every detail is literal or not, the takeaway is clear. Sigurd won the battle and still lost to a corpse. The only thing sharper than Brigte's bite was the irony. No glorious death in combat, no saga-worthy standoff, just one tooth, one scratch, and a really poor decision about saddle decor. If there's a moral here, it's this. Don't bring heads home as souvenirs, especially ones with good dental structure. Sigurd's title was the Mighty. His downfall? One dead guy's mouth that wasn't quite done talking. Death by pig. In medieval Paris, pigs weren't pets, they were public hazards. They roamed the streets like they owned the place, rooting through trash, trampling gardens, and occasionally causing royal fatalities. Nobody enforced fencing laws, and city pigs were basically feral sausages waiting to happen. In 1131, 15-year-old Prince Philip, eldest son of King Louis VI, was riding through the streets near the Church of Saint Marcel. He was already crowned co-king of France. The future of the Capetian dynasty, the whole deal. Then a pig sprinted into the road. His horse panicked. It reared. Philip flew off. His head hit the stone pavement hard enough to fracture his skull. He was dead by the next day. One moment, next king of France. Next moment, pork-induced fatality. Back then, pigs weren't confined to farms. They were part of the urban ecosystem. They cleaned up garbage, doubled as mobile meat, and occasionally launched a prince into the afterlife. They could be aggressive, too. Some grew tusks, some were feral, and most had no fear of humans, because in Paris, the pigs were locals. Attempts to control them usually failed. Fines were rare. Fences were optional. People just stepped around them unless the pigs moved first. The streets were narrow, the crowds thick, and livestock roamed wherever they pleased. It wasn't a zoo. It was a medieval free-for-all with hooves and snouts. That pig didn't mean to kill a king in waiting, but no one ever made it its problem not to. This wasn't a back-alley accident. It happened in the open, in broad daylight. Near a church, Paris wasn't some peaceful city of lovers and baguettes. It was chaos on hooves. And one badly timed pig just rewrote the royal family tree. Philip's death forced King Louis to shift the crown to his younger son, the future Louis VII. And that changed everything. Louis VII eventually married Eleanor of Aquitaine, lost her to Henry II of England, and kick-started 300 years of Anglo-French hostility. If that pig hadn't crossed the road, European history might look very different. Chroniclers of the time didn't hold back. Orderic Vitalis called it a sudden misfortune. Others just said, a pig ran beneath the hooves. That's all it took. No assassins, no betrayal. Just a rogue pig with a poor sense of timing. It took decades and multiple lawsuits before city officials finally cracked down on free-roaming livestock. Philip wasn't the first noble to die this way, but he was definitely the highest ranking, which made him, in a way, the most powerful victim of street bacon in recorded history. Death by beard. Hans Steininger was famous for one thing, his beard. It was over 4.5 feet long. Locals in Braunau am Inn, Austria, considered it a civic treasure. He usually kept it rolled up and tucked into a leather pouch. Practical, safe, less of a tripping hazard. One day, in 1567, the town caught fire. Hans ran from his home in a hurry, but didn't secure the beard. It came loose as he fled, trailing behind him like a medieval scarf with a death wish. Somewhere on the staircase, he stepped on it, lost his footing, and broke his neck. That was it. One trip, one fall, and he was gone. Not in battle, not in sickness, not even from smoke inhalation. The beard did it. The very thing that made him a local celebrity became the instrument of his downfall. There's no record of anyone laughing, but come on, this is peak tragic slapstick. In a time when grooming products were mostly wood ash and ego, Hans stood out. His beard wasn't just long, it was legendary. Locals wrote about it. Travelers came just to see it. He was a walking world record before those even existed. The town leaned into it. His image became folklore. After his death, they didn't bury the beard, they preserved it. Carefully displayed behind glass, it outlived him by centuries. You can still visit it today, looking like it just retired from public life. And once a year, Braunau reenacts his story in full parade glory. Yes, including a fake beard and a stunt fall. Because if you're going to go out in style, you might as well make it a local holiday. You might think there's some poetic lesson here, like vanity or pride, or the dangers of 16th century facial hair. But no, the lesson is, don't let your personal brand get you killed. Hans wasn't a ruler, a warlord, or a soldier. He was just a guy with excellent beard genetics and bad luck on the stairs. His name would have faded into small-town history if not for the fact that he got taken out by his own grooming choices. Death by manners. Tycho Brahe was the kind of guy who had a pet elk, a gold nose, and the best astronomical instruments in Europe before telescopes were even a thing. He mapped stars with eye-measuring tools and lived on his own island. He also may have died because he didn't want to pee at a dinner party. In October 1601, Tycho was attending a banquet in Prague hosted by a nobleman. Fancy affair. Lots of wine. But Brahe, ever the courtly gentleman, refused to excuse himself. Leaving the table mid-meal was considered rude in elite circles, especially during long feasts. So he held it, and held it, and held it. According to Johannes Kepler, who later inherited Tycho's notes, and probably his weird chair, Brahe developed severe pain and couldn't urinate for over 10 days. He eventually died from a burst bladder, or more likely, uremia from a urinary tract blockage. Either way, the official diagnosis? Fatal politeness. At the time, rumors swirled about poison. Some blamed mercury, since traces were found in his remains. But a 2010 exhumation by Danish and Czech scientists shut that down. No evidence of toxic levels, just signs of kidney failure. Basically, the original story held up. The man straight up died from not using the bathroom. He was 54, brilliant, odd, and apparently more afraid of seeming rude than suffering organ failure. His tombstone didn't mention this detail, for obvious reasons. It's especially wild because Tycho didn't exactly live a low-profile life. He had a prosthetic nose made of brass after losing the real one in a duel over math. He owned a tame moose that got drunk and fell downstairs. And yet the thing that killed him? Not wine, not swords. Just his own bladder begging for mercy. People remember Tycho for his star charts and gold nose, but they rarely mention the fatal decision to sit politely in place while his organs filed complaints. He didn't fall in battle. He didn't catch a plague. He just didn't stand up when his body told him to. And for that, history added one more strange footnote to a man who already had plenty. Death by demonstration. Clement Vallandigham wasn't your average lawyer. He had been a congressman, a Civil War-era firebrand, and a man who made enemies faster than he made laws. But what sealed his place in legal history wasn't politics, but one wildly ill-timed performance. In 1871, Vallandigham took on a murder case in Lebanon, Ohio. His client was accused of shooting a man during a barroom scuffle. Vallandigham had a theory. The victim had actually fired the weapon himself by accident while trying to draw it. It was risky. The jury wasn't buying it. So Vallandigham, ever the showman, decided to act it out. During trial prep in his hotel room, he grabbed a pistol, one he believed was unloaded, and demonstrated the exact movement. Just him, a mirror, and a reenactment, meant to prove how awkwardly someone might draw a weapon from a pocket. But the pistol wasn't empty. It discharged. Vallandigham was seriously wounded. Doctors did what they could, but he passed away the next day. Here's the kicker. He still won the case. The demonstration, paired with witness testimony, convinced the jury. His client was acquitted. In the courtroom, the defense worked perfectly. Just not for the person delivering it. This wasn't a dramatic stunt gone wrong. It wasn't even meant for the jury yet. It was a dry run, a dress rehearsal. Vallandigham had intended to deliver the performance in court the next morning. History never gave him the chance. At the time, his death was called a tragic loss for justice. Others saw it as a grim example of what happens when confidence outruns caution. He was remembered less for his politics, and more for one of the most bizarre exits in legal history. No matter how you frame it, Vallandigham died doing what he did best, arguing his point like he meant it, just maybe a little too literally. Death by vegetables. Basil Brown wasn't a criminal, a soldier, or an explorer. He was a health nut, a real one. In 1974, the 48-year-old from Croydon became famous for doing what your doctor begs you to do, eating more vegetables. Except he took it to such an extreme, it killed him. Brown was obsessed with vitamins, especially vitamin A. He believed in natural health, avoided processed food, and downed carrot juice like it was oxygen. Over the course of just 10 days, he reportedly drank around 10 gallons of the stuff, on top of high-dose vitamin A pills. His skin turned bright orange. Not metaphorically, literally. His liver gave up. According to the coroner's report, Brown consumed over 70 million units of vitamin A in just over a week. The safe recommended daily amount? About 3,000 to 10,000 units, depending on your age and gender. Brown was taking in thousands of times that. His liver failed under the toxic load. Hypervitaminosis A is rare, but real. It doesn't just mean too many carrots. It means fat-soluble vitamins building up in your body until your internal systems can't handle the overload. Nausea, headaches, organ failure, the works. Brown hit every marker, despite technically eating healthy. He wasn't trying to be reckless. He thought he was doing everything right. No sugar, no alcohol, just juice, supplements, and dedication. But nutrition doesn't work that way. There's a reason it's called a balanced diet. At the inquest, officials concluded he had effectively poisoned himself with over-purity. No foul play, just a one-man experiment in extreme health gone off the rails. People today still joke about carrot overdose, thanks to this case. But the truth isn't funny. It's a reminder that even good things, when taken far enough, can flip on you. Basil Brown wanted to live better. Instead, he proved there really can be too much of a good thing, especially if you drink it by the gallon. Death by window confidence. Gary Hoy was a successful corporate lawyer in Toronto. Smart, professional, respected. But more than anything, Gary was proud of one very specific fact. The windows on the 24th floor of his office building were made of unbreakable glass. And he loved proving it. It became his go-to party trick. During office tours or presentations for interns, Gary would take a few steps back and hurl himself at the window. The glass would flex, then bounce him off like a trampoline. Instant awe, no harm done. Until one day, it was. On July 9, 1993, Hoy was giving a tour to a group of students at the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower. As part of his regular routine, he ran at the window to demonstrate its strength. The glass didn't break. Technically, he was right about that. But the entire window pane popped out of the frame. He fell 24 stories. Emergency responders confirmed the tragic detail. The window was still intact when they found it. It hadn't shattered. It had simply failed to stay attached to the building. Structural integrity, 10 out of 10. Installation, 0. Hoy's death made international headlines. Some thought it was an urban legend, but it was very real. His firm, Holden Day Wilson, tried to recover from the incident but shut down within a few years, possibly due to the bad press, possibly not. What's clear is that Gary Hoy wasn't doing something malicious, dangerous, or criminal. He believed in his building materials. He believed so hard, he bet his life on it. And he'd gotten away with it before, multiple times. People still reference his death when talking about overconfidence, workplace safety, or the risks of corporate showmanship. Some even cite it in engineering ethics classes. It's the kind of story you wish were made up, but you also can't stop telling it. Hoy didn't break the glass, but the glass broke him. Still mad about your boss not saying thank you? In ancient Egypt, if your boss died, you got strangled and buried next to him. On purpose. Welcome to a civilization where loyalty was deadly. The first known state execution. Before guillotines, gallows, or firing squads, ancient Egypt had something darker, retainer sacrifice. And it wasn't quiet. Around 3000 BCE, at a royal burial site in Abydos, Egypt, pulled off one of the oldest mass executions in history, all for a dead king. The guy in question? Likely Pharaoh Jer, one of the earliest rulers of the First Dynasty. He died young, but the send-off was excessive. Archaeologists uncovered dozens of bodies buried alongside him. We're talking at least 318 people, all sacrificed to join him in the afterlife. Their tombs are packed around his like a gruesome farewell party. Except they didn't choose to be there. Evidence shows these weren't slaves. Some wore jewelry. A few had their own small tombs. Historians believe they were household staff, nurses, cooks, maybe even musicians, killed so they could serve the pharaoh forever. Yeah, job loyalty had deadly consequences. How did they die? Probably strangulation or poison. Their bodies show no trauma, and they were buried neatly, not dumped. Some had their own grave goods too. The ancient Egyptians believed this was a promotion, not a murder, a twisted kind of honor. And it wasn't a one-time thing. This ritual killing happened for 3 full generations of kings. The tomb of Pharaoh Aha, another early ruler, had over 30 sacrificial victims. And don't forget Tomb Uj, belonging to a pre-dynastic ruler, possibly Scorpion I. His burial site included dozens of decapitated servants. That's right, some of the earliest writing in human history is carved next to a pile of corpses. Eventually, Egypt wised up. By the time Pharaoh Khsekhemwy came around, late 2nd Dynasty, real people were swapped out for Shabdi dolls, little figurines meant to work for you in the afterlife. Plastic employees, ancient edition. So, did they stop sacrificing people because they got more ethical? Not likely. More like it was wasteful. Killing your entire staff every time a ruler died kind of wrecks your workforce. The hacking of the harem plotters. Ramses III was Egypt's last real pharaoh with power, and his palace? Total chaos. In 1155 BCE, the royal harem launched a full-blown coup. Think knives, spells, and insider betrayal. The plan? Murder the king and put someone else, Pentaweret, the rebellious prince, on the throne. This wasn't gossip. We've got papyrus court records, full of names, crimes, and punishments. It's called the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, and it reads like an ancient tabloid from hell. More than 40 people were tried. High officials, magicians, concubines, you name it. Their crimes? Conspiracy, witchcraft, and attempted regicide? Their punishments? Let's just say subtlety wasn't Egypt's strong suit. Some were burned alive, others had their noses and ears cut off, and a few were forced to commit suicide in court. One guy had to take his own life, right there during sentencing, no pressure. And what about Pentaweret, the prince in question? He was given a dagger and told to do the honors himself. His body was found later, buried without royal rites. His lungs were overinflated, his skin bruised, possibly from strangulation or being buried alive. Historians still debate it. Meanwhile, Ramses III? He didn't exactly walk away unscathed. His mummy, scanned in 2012, showed his throat slashed all the way to the spine. He never had a chance. So, yeah, the plot technically worked. The cover-up just didn't. Even more brutal? The trials were held in secret courts, with guards as judges. Some of the accused were dragged in bags. One official's wife was executed in front of him. Another was mutilated, then paraded through town as a warning. And just to rub it in, they burned all records of the conspirators' names in official monuments. Ancient Egypt had cancel culture long before social media. Live burning of heretics. Akhenaten thought he could rewrite religion. Spoiler, Egypt didn't like that. Around 1350 BCE, he threw out the old gods, scrapped temples, and told everyone, worship the sun disk or else. That god was Aten, and Akhenaten made himself the top and only priest. For a while, he ruled from his weird new city, Akhetaten, now called Amarna. But when Akhenaten died, the old religion came back with a vengeance. And by came back, we mean it lit torches and got violent. The backlash was brutal. His statues were smashed, his city abandoned, and his followers? Some were burned alive for refusing to switch back to the traditional gods. This wasn't metaphorical. Burnings were a known punishment in the late 18th dynasty, especially for heresy. Egypt didn't take kindly to people who disrespected Amun, the king of gods. And if you were part of Aten's cult, you were seen as a traitor to both the state and the cosmos. Religious officials loyal to Akhenaten were dragged out of their homes, their names scraped off walls, and in extreme cases, publicly executed by fire. Burnings likely happened at temple gates, both punishment and purification, all in one horrifying display. Bones found near Amarna show signs of extreme heat damage and breakage, possibly from ritual execution. Even Akhenaten's daughter-wife, yes, that was a thing, was erased from records. His son, the boy king Tutankhamun, was rushed into power just to undo the chaos. His name literally means living image of Amun, a PR stunt to show the old gods were back in charge. To top it off, Akhenaten's body was probably dug up and dumped. His tomb at Amarna was found empty. Some think he was reburied in secret. Others believe the priests torched his remains. The message? Don't mess with tradition. This wasn't just a regime change. It was religious revenge. A full-on holy purge, with fire as its favorite tool. The priests of Amun didn't just reclaim power, they turned heretics into smoke signals. And Egypt made sure the Aten cult went up in flames, literally. The exotic diplomacy of Punt. Let's talk about Egypt's version of a goodwill tour. Around 1470 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Hatshepsut, a full-blown royal expedition set sail to the mysterious land of Punt, a lush trade hub somewhere along the Red Sea, likely in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. The goal? Incense, gold, rare animals, and a chance to flex power without swinging a sword. And it worked. The journey is immortalized on the walls of Deir el-Bahri, where Egypt's artists didn't hold back. Monkeys, panthers, myrrh trees yanked from the earth. It was all hauled home like it was Black Friday. But the real attention grabber? The royal family of Punt, carved right there on the walls, standing beside the goods. We see King Parahu and his wife, Queen Ati, drawn with full bellies and hunched backs, details scholars debate to this day. Some call it realism, others call it mockery. Either way, it made a statement. Look who came crawling to Egypt. But here's where it stops being pretty. While Egypt loved to show off foreign rulers, there's no proof that the royals of Punt were captured or brought back. No tombs, no prisoner inscriptions, no bones in Thebes with their names on them. Just images, which, in ancient Egypt, could be just as powerful and just as damning. What we do know: Egypt had a habit of displaying their enemies in art, sometimes with limbs cut off, tongues out, or bodies bound in humiliating poses. There are temple texts, especially those tied to Sekhmet, that talk about offering the limbs of foreign enemies. But that wasn't diplomacy, it was war ritual. And this wasn't that. The Punt expedition was peaceful, even celebrated. No spears, no shackles, just exotic goods and ego-stroking carvings. The whole thing was state propaganda wrapped in incense smoke. So no, there was no princess chopped to pieces. But the message was still clear. Egypt ruled the narrative. Even when you came in peace, your image belonged to the pharaoh. And if Hatshepsut wanted to turn you into wall art, you posed. Or else. In ancient Egypt, soft power still came with sharp edges. And sometimes, humiliation was the real souvenir. Tomb robbers and slow death. By the time of Ramses IX, Egypt was broke, chaotic, and paranoid. The empire had shrunk, priests ran half the country, and even the tombs of pharaohs, supposedly sacred, were getting looted left and right. And when they caught you? Oh, you wished they hadn't. This was the 20th dynasty, and the Valley of the Kings wasn't just a royal cemetery. It was ground zero for some of the harshest punishments ever handed out. The government launched multiple crackdowns. The most famous? Detailed in the Abbott Papyrus, which is basically an ancient CSI report. Tomb robbing was treated like high treason. These weren't just common thieves. Some were temple workers, embalmers, or guards, insiders who knew exactly where the loot was buried. They weren't just stealing gold. They were tearing open the mummies of kings, ripping off amulets, and melting down funerary masks. When they got caught, things got ugly. Some were beaten until they confessed. One gang had their hands chopped off before being impaled on wooden stakes outside the city. In one case, a robber was reportedly tied to a post and left in the sun to rot alive. No food, no water. Others were publicly lashed until unconscious, then dragged through the streets as a warning. Even suspects who hadn't stolen a thing could end up mutilated. The logic? If your friend robbed a tomb, you probably knew. So, guilt by association got you a quick trial, if you were lucky, and a slow death if you weren't. This wasn't just about justice, it was about fear. The government was trying to control a collapsing system, and executions became propaganda. Locals were told the gods demanded punishment. Officials posted execution scenes at temple walls. In one inscription, a thief screams that he deserves death while being burned. But the biggest twist? Some of the tombs were robbed by the same priests who ran the trials. Yep. The guys handing out punishments were sometimes in on the heist. In ancient Egypt, you didn't have to rob a king to end up dead. You just had to be close enough to one when things went missing. And once the system decided you were guilty, mercy wasn't part of the plan. Purge in the time of Psamtik. By 600 BCE, Egypt was running on fumes. The empire was a patchwork of old temples, foreign spies, and governors who were a little too cozy with bribe money. Then came Psamtik I, a pharaoh who didn't inherit peace, he took it. After years of civil war and Assyrian bullying, he made one thing clear: play straight or die badly. This was the start of the Sate dynasty, and Psamtik had a serious cleanup agenda. That meant corrupt officials, tax collectors, judges, military commanders were dragged out of the shadows and slammed with charges: embezzlement, treason, secret deals with the Persians. That got you executed, and it wasn't subtle. We don't have temple records listing each death, but Greek historians like Herodotus tell us Egypt punished state betrayal harshly. Hanging wasn't common. They preferred burning, beheading, or drowning. Public executions weren't entertainment, they were statements. And Psamtik made a lot of statements. High-ranking priests accused of colluding with enemies were burned alive in front of their own sanctuaries. One military commander caught leaking defense plans to the east, beheaded, and his body tossed in the Nile, denying him a proper burial and, in Egyptian belief, any shot at an afterlife. There's also evidence of name erasure from temple walls, a classic move for disgraced elites. You messed with Psamtik's rule, and you didn't just lose your life, you lost your legacy. Some officials weren't even given full mummification. Left unembalmed, no coffin, no priest, just dumped. That was the worst fate imaginable. Forgotten. And while the records don't give us a death-by-death playbook, inscriptions from this period show a spike in state justice language. Phrases like purified the land of traitors and delivered judgment upon liars. Translation: people were getting wiped out, fast. This wasn't Pharaoh as priest, this was Pharaoh as executioner. Psamtik knew Egypt couldn't survive another rebellion or another sellout priest taking Persian gold, so he ran his government like a trap, quiet until it wasn't. The crushed rebels of the Theban revolt. Before the Ptolemies and Persians, Egypt got steamrolled by someone they didn't expect: the Nubians. Around 750 BCE, a king named Piye marched north from Kush and took Egypt like it owed him money. The pharaohs had grown soft, the priests were too powerful, so Piye brought order with a war club and a stone-cold execution list. The Theban revolt was Piye's warning shot. Southern Egypt had broken off from the north, and local warlords were fighting like toddlers over toys. Piye stepped in claiming to restore Ma'at, cosmic order. But really, he just flattened everything in his way. According to his own victory stela, basically a brag carved in stone, Piye stormed into Thebes, rounded up the rebel rulers, and didn't just kill them. He ritually humiliated and crushed them. One prince was bound, stripped naked, and forced to kneel before Piye's horse. Not even the pharaoh, his horse. And the ones who didn't submit? Executed at temple gates, their heads bashed in with ceremonial maces, a favorite weapon for kings who wanted divine-style executions. Blood wasn't a side effect. It was part of the ritual. Their corpses were displayed as warnings, left out for the vultures and sun. Temples recorded these events like gospel. One inscription says the enemies of Piye were made into offerings for Amun, which is a polite way of saying their dismembered bodies were tossed on altars. This wasn't just military domination. It was spiritual warfare. Piye claimed the rebels had violated divine law by rejecting Amun's authority, so their deaths weren't just executions, they were sacrifices. And he didn't stop at the leaders. Lower commanders, mercenaries, and even scribes who copied rebel orders were dragged from their posts and killed on sight. Some were burned. Others were tossed into the Nile with stones tied to their feet, so they'd never reach the afterlife. For PA, this was more than conquest. It was punishment, a cosmic beatdown in the name of God and King. The message was clear. You don't get to defy the divine and walk away breathing. The Theban revolt didn't just fail. It got ceremonially obliterated, and Egypt learned the hard way. PA didn't do mercy. The execution of Egyptian rebels. By 237 BCE, the crocodiles weren't the only ones with bite. Ptolemy III Euergetes, one of the stronger Greek rulers of Egypt, had a problem. Egyptians were fed up. The temples were broke, taxes were brutal, and the locals didn't love being ruled by Greeks, who pretended to be pharaohs on weekends. So rebellions flared, especially in Upper Egypt, where traditional priesthood still held real influence. One major hotspot? The Temple of Horus at Edfu. It was the epicenter of a full-blown uprising by Egyptian priests and locals who refused to recognize Ptolemaic control. Ptolemy's response wasn't subtle. He sent troops to Edfu, stormed the temple precinct, and captured dozens of rebel priests. According to inscriptions from the Naos of Edfu and secondary historical accounts, these rebels were treated as traitors, not just to the state, but to the gods. The punishment? Execution inside the temple walls. That alone was sacrilege. Blood wasn't supposed to spill on sacred ground, but Ptolemy wanted to make a point. Rebels were strangled, beheaded, or burned at the temple gates. Some were buried in unmarked pits nearby, their priestly status revoked in both life and death. Even worse, the names of executed priests were erased from temple records. This was more than death. It was spiritual annihilation. In ancient Egyptian belief, being forgotten was the worst fate imaginable. After the crackdown, Ptolemy III commissioned major renovations at Edfu. New carvings, new walls, new narratives. The official version? Peace, piety, divine order restored. The real version? Blood on the floor and fear in the air. We know from surviving inscriptions that local resistance continued, but more quietly. The message had landed. Disobey the pharaoh, Greek or not, and you wouldn't just die. You'd be scrubbed from history. The Greeks built libraries, yes, but they also built gallows. And in temples like Edfu, justice wasn't just served, it was carved in stone, soaked in ash, and sold as harmony. Under Ptolemaic rule, Egypt got a new kind of priest, the kind who bled for standing too tall, and a new kind of god, one who didn't forgive uprisings. He hired soldiers. Cleopatra's poison rivals. Cleopatra gets all the credit for her lovers, her eyeliner, and her drama. But let's be clear, she wasn't just playing chess in politics. She was flipping the whole board and poisoning the other players. Family, friends, rivals, no one was off limits. Especially if they had a claim to her throne. Let's start with her brother. Actually, brothers Cleopatra married two of them. That's how the Ptolemies rolled. First up, Ptolemy XIII, a kid king used as a puppet by court officials. When Cleopatra started taking too much power, the court pushed her out. She raised an army. He threw her out of Alexandria. Then Julius Caesar showed up, got involved in a civil war, and guess who ended up dead in the Nile? Ptolemy XIII. Official story? He drowned. Real talk? Probably stabbed and dumped. Next came Ptolemy XIV, her younger brother and new co-ruler. He was a figurehead while Cleopatra had Caesar's attention. Then Caesar was assassinated in Rome. And magically, Ptolemy XIV died at age 15. Cause of death? Sudden illness, which is ancient, speak for absolutely poisoned. Cleopatra needed her son, Caesarion, as the new co-ruler. Ptolemy was in the way. Problem solved. And then there's Arsinoe IV, her sister and the real threat. Arsinoe led a revolt during the Alexandrian War and even declared herself pharaoh. When the smoke cleared, Cleopatra exiled her to Ephesus, where she took sanctuary in a temple. For a few years, she was safe, until Cleopatra wanted to impress Mark Antony. So what did she do? She asked Antony to have Arsinoe dragged out of the temple, a sanctuary violation, and executed on the steps. Roman records confirm it happened. A priestess beheaded on sacred ground, just to tie up loose ends. And Cleopatra didn't even flinch. These weren't random acts of rage. This was strategic execution. Cleopatra ruled through beauty, sure, but also through body count. She didn't wait for rivals to rise. She cut them down before they got the chance. The throne wasn't inherited. It was defended, and Cleopatra played to win. If someone shared her blood, they were more likely to spill it than sit beside her. Octavian's bloody entry into Egypt. When Octavian marched into Egypt in 30 BCE, he didn't just take the throne. He vacuumed out the soul of an empire. Cleopatra was dead. Antony was gone. Caesarion was handled. Now it was time to make Egypt understand what Roman peace looked like. Cassius Dio tells us the resistance was small because Octavian didn't give it time to grow. Antony's army was scattered, and Alexandria knew the gods weren't coming. But even then, loyalists and stragglers tried to stir trouble. Some hid weapons, some stalled grain shipments, some just refused to kneel. Octavian answered with executions. Fast ones, public ones, brutal ones. Antony's top supporters, including Roman citizens and senators, were rounded up and killed without trial. A clear message: your alliances die with your patron. As for methods, Roman justice had options: beheading for elites, strangling for traitors, crucifixion for everyone else. While Dio doesn't detail how each died, the pattern was clear. If you'd backed Antony and Octavian didn't like your face, you vanished. Octavian also cleaned house politically. Temples lost autonomy. Egyptian priests were monitored, their funding slashed. Some cults were allowed to survive, but only under Roman eyes. Egypt wasn't just defeated, it was restructured. Its gods no longer answered to pharaohs, they answered to Caesar. No official list exists of how many were killed. No long scroll cataloging names, just gaps. In temple records, in government rolls, in families. The silence after Octavian's peace tells its own story. The Old Kingdom, 3,000 years strong, ended in one generation. Not with a war, not with a burning city, but with quiet purges, backroom executions, and a foreign emperor writing the final chapter. You can still walk the streets of Alexandria today. But the dynasty, the bloodline, the divine rule, buried under marble and taxes. Rome didn't need to massacre a population, it just needed to make fear visible. And for every Egyptian watching Octavian's army roll through the gates, the message was carved into the silence. Gods don't rule here anymore, Rome does. Rome called itself civilized. Then it crucified 6,000 people in a straight line just to decorate the highway. Very tasteful. Interior design by dictatorship. The Vestal Burial. In early Rome, religion was not a weekend hobby. It was state security. The Romans believed the gods treated the city like a contract. Keep the rituals clean, you get protection. Break the rules, everyone suffers. So, when a Vestal virgin broke her vow of chastity, the Senate treated it like treason. No trial by jury. Just a panel of old men in togas deciding she ruined cosmic insurance. The Vestals served for 30 years. They guarded the sacred fire of Vesta. That fire symbolized Rome's life. If you were a Vestal and slept with anyone, the assumption was simple: you just endangered the empire. Rome did not joke about this. They buried you alive under the Campus Celeratus, which literally meant the accursed field. Pleasant branding. The method was neat, which made it worse. Romans could not legally spill Vestal blood, so they got creative. A small chamber was dug underground. A couch, a lamp, bread, water, oil. Just enough to pretend it was not killing. Then the priest sealed the door. Dirt piled on top. You died slowly in darkness, out of sight, but very much on record. The most documented case comes from Aulus Gellius and Plutarch. A Vestal named Cornelia. She said she was innocent. They buried her anyway. One witness wrote that she climbed the steps with dignity, which is historians speak for, she knew they were going to do it no matter what. Tacitus later said some of these accusations were political payback. Being holy did not protect you from Senate drama, it just gave them a ceremonial excuse. The eerie part is that the public watched it. Not the burial itself, but the procession. The crowd stood silent. No cheering, no pity. If the gods were angry, you did not want to look sympathetic to the problem. Rome claimed this was purification. That word did a lot of heavy lifting. They buried a living woman to keep a fire, symbolic of purity, alive. One life traded for optics. Roman justice had no chill. Cannae. Survival was a crime. The Battle of Cannae, in 216 BCE, was the day Rome discovered what a real beating looked like. Hannibal trapped the Roman army in a perfect pocket formation and crushed them. Ancient sources estimate 70,000 Roman soldiers dead in a single day. It was the worst battlefield loss in Roman history. The survivors came home ashamed, not celebrated. Rome treated them as if they had committed a public scandal. The Senate expected them to die rather than retreat. A Roman soldier was supposed to hold the line until his body gave out. Living through defeat looked suspicious. After the fight, a group of survivors tried to plead for ransom money so the state would pay to free captured soldiers. The Senate refused. They said no soldier who surrendered deserved rescue. To them, dying was patriotic. Coming home breathing was apparently poor manners. Several officers were punished just for surviving. One of the most recorded examples is Gnaeus Lentulus. He tried to defend himself. He said surviving could still serve Rome. The Senate did not care. He was barred from public office. Others were sent to disgrace camps, trapped in military exile. They were forced to live with shame until they died. Rome had a rule in wartime: better a glorious corpse than a breathing embarrassment. Many officers starved themselves rather than live with the Senate's sentence. Suicide was a loophole that restored honor. They called it discipline. Everyone else would call it lethal peer pressure. This was also the battle that taught the Senate to distrust mercy. Even defeat had to be punished. Rome believed fear kept discipline tighter than loyalty. If you were captured, the state blamed you, not the enemy. The logic was simple: if you were still alive, you must have chosen life over Rome. The fact that Hannibal surrounded the entire army did not matter. What made it worse is that this attitude became normal. Rome built its culture on the idea that pain kept people obedient. Coming home from the dead was heroic in myths. In reality, Rome wanted you dead if you dragged your dignity back with you. Kine was not just a disaster, it was a message. You could die as a hero, or you could live as the problem. The world's worst Senate meeting. By 133 BCE, Rome had money pouring in from conquered lands, but most of it was going straight into the pockets of a small ruling class. Ordinary farmers were losing land. Soldiers were returning from wars with nothing to rebuild. Rome had an economic fire burning, and the Senate kept pretending the smoke was decorative mist. Enter Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. He was a tribune of the plebs, which meant he could propose laws to help regular citizens. His land reform bill threatened wealthy senators who hoarded public land. Tiberius wanted to fix inequality. The Senate wanted him to stop bringing it up in public. He ignored them. They panicked, not with debate, but with homicide. The attack happened during a Senate session near the Temple of Jupiter. No swords, no official execution order, just pure mob justice. A group of senators and their supporters stormed the assembly carrying broken furniture parts and roof tiles. The first tribune assassination in Roman history was carried out with whatever was not nailed down. Plutarch writes that Tiberius tried to flee but was clubbed to death and tossed into the Tiber River. The Senate later claimed they were saving the Republic. This phrase became a convenient mask in Roman politics. Whenever powerful men wanted someone dead, they said it was for stability. Translation: Tiberius had embarrassed them by trying to fix the problem they caused. His supporters were killed too. Up to 300 people may have died in the aftermath, depending on the source. The Senate also outlawed public mourning for him, as if grief itself was threatening their authority. Reform was treated as revolt. A tribune defending citizens was treated like a criminal. This killing became the unofficial pilot episode for Roman political violence. From this moment on, senators learned something dangerous. You did not need a legal process if you had furniture with sharp edges and enough angry aristocrats in a group. The Republic claimed it was built on law. But when a tribune tried to use that law for the public instead of the elite, Rome caved in and replaced order with a riot. They called it preserving tradition. It looked a lot more like crowd assault with paperwork. 6,000 crosses on the road to Rome. In 71 BCE, Rome crushed the slave revolt led by Spartacus. The army won, but the Senate wanted something bigger than victory. They wanted a message carved into the landscape. After the final battle, around 6,000 captured rebels were sentenced to crucifixion. Not inside a city, not in a hidden field. They were nailed up along the Appian Way, the main road into Rome, stretching roughly 120 miles. This was not an execution, it was a billboard. Appian writes that the crosses were placed one after another so that anyone walking toward Rome passed a slow-motion graveyard. There were no burials. The bodies stayed up until they fell apart. Crucifixion was not a quick death. It could take days. The point was not punishment. The point was theater. Roman elites feared slaves more than foreign armies. A rebellion meant the empire's entire labor system looked weak. So they staged fear as national policy. The message was, if you want freedom, Rome will pin you to a pole until the birds lose interest. Most of these men were not generals or war criminals. Many were farmers, captives, or workers with no rights at all. The Senate still chose full public torture. A soldier could stab a man cleanly, a politician could not. He needed spectacle. There is no record of Spartacus's body. Some historians think he died in battle. Others think he vanished in the chaos. Rome could tolerate his corpse. They could not tolerate his example. Killing a legend was easier than proving he stayed dead. The Appian crucifixions remained one of the largest mass executions in Roman history. It set the standard. Rome had discovered a propaganda method that did not need speeches. Misery in a straight line. This was the empire's version of a service reminder. Do not revolt. Do not resist. Do not dream above your rank. The state might not care how you lived, but it was deeply invested in how you died. The Republic claimed it brought order to the world. On this road, order looked a lot like a construction project staffed by corpses. The Catiline stranglings. By 63 BCE, Rome was nervous. Debt riots, corruption scandals, class anger, and a senate full of men who treated chaos as a management style. Then Lucius Sergius Catiline tried to organize an uprising. He promised debt relief, office reform, and the removal of senators who acted like landlords wearing robes. The Senate panicked. They were not afraid of war. They were afraid of voters getting ideas. Cicero, the consul at the time, gave his famous speeches against Catiline. He made the Senate believe the threat would spread if they hesitated. Rome had a legal process for treason trials, but the Senate did not want paperwork. They passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the final decree, which let them ignore normal law in the name of saving the state. Emergency law with no rules attached. 5 captured conspirators were sent to the Tullianum, the city's oldest state prison. The word prison makes it sound humane. It was a stone pit that stank of sewage, humidity, and death. Sallust wrote that the air inside corrupted the body. Execution there did not use swords. The men were strangled one by one with rope, while officials stood by to verify it was proper procedure. There were no appeals and defense, no jury. The Senate called it national security. It was closer to a political hit job wrapped in ritual. Cicero bragged that he saved the republic. He left the chamber expecting applause. Instead, many senators went quiet. They knew what had just happened. The legal right to kill your enemy without trial now had precedent. No empire collapses in a single day. It dissolves by normalizing shortcuts. Later Romans looked back and called this moment the one where fear gained legal status. If the Senate could execute citizens in secret, the Constitution meant whatever the winning faction said it meant that week. The bodies of the conspirators were never returned to their families. The Senate wanted them erased from public memory. They failed. Every historian since has talked about them, and none of them say, "Great job, Rome." This was not justice. It was a warning. Rome had laws until the Senate got inconvenienced. After that, rope. 23 stabs, 1 Caesar. By 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome. He won civil wars, rewrote laws, and stacked offices until he didn't look like a consul anymore. He looked like a one-man government with good lighting. The Senate said they feared dictatorship. What they really feared was irrelevance. A group of senators, at least 60 of them, decided the solution was homicide with a patriotic label on it. Caesar entered the theater of Pompey for a Senate session on the Ides of March. He had only a light guard. Nobody expected a stabbing spree in a government building before lunch. That changed fast. According to Suetonius and Plutarch, the first blow hit his shoulder. Then more men jumped in. 23 stab wounds total. A physician named Antistius inspected the body afterward and said only one wound, the one to his chest, was actually fatal. The rest were chaos, hesitation, or political enthusiasm gone sloppy. The conspirators expected Rome to cheer. They thought people would flood the streets to celebrate restored liberty. Instead, the city froze. Killing Caesar did not stop his influence. It turned him into a martyr. The Senate could have exiled him, but exile does not create legends. Murder does. The shock was not the killing. Rome was used to violence. The shock was who did it. Senators in formal robes, turning a state meeting into a group execution. Government stopped being a place of law and turned into a crime scene. Some of the killers later bragged that it was an honorable act. They tried to stage a triumph. No one applauded. They misread the room so badly that Caesar's supporters used the anger to push the Republic into full collapse. The assassination meant to save Rome actually gave Rome an emperor. The Republic was alive in the morning and mortally wounded by afternoon. The Senate claimed this was the price of freedom. The truth was simpler. They stabbed a man 23 times because they were out of arguments. Germanicus and the poison plot. By 19 CE, Germanicus was the golden boy of Rome. Adopted by Tiberius. Popular with troops. Loved by the public. Charismatic in a way that made senators nervous. He looked like the next emperor, without even trying. That was a problem in a city where popularity counted as a threat. During his travels in the eastern provinces, he fell mysteriously ill in Antioch. The official story at first was bad climate, bad food, unlucky sickness, the usual Roman something in the water excuse. Then evidence started piling up. When his allies inspected his home, they found cursed tablets, human ashes, charred bone fragments, and hair tied in ritual knots. A full witchcraft starter kit. Tacitus reports that Germanicus accused Gnaeus Piso, the governor of Syria, of poisoning him. Piso was a loyalist of Tiberius. He had every motive to stop a future rival before he grew into a successor. Poison was the Roman choice for killing people who were too high-ranking for swords and too popular for open execution. No blood, no crowd, no martyr. Germanicus lingered for weeks. Not a quick death. He said goodbye to his friends and told them to stay loyal to his family. If a man expects recovery, he gives orders. If he expects sabotage, he gives instructions for revenge. He chose the second. After his death, Rome did not mourn quietly. The public demanded answers. Piso was dragged into a trial so explosive that senators panicked about the fallout. Records say Piso killed himself before the verdict. In Roman politics, that phrase often meant someone helped. Tiberius stayed strangely calm through all of it. Historians still debate whether he ordered the poisoning or simply tolerated it, but the result was clear. Germanicus died young, and the path to the throne stayed closed. This case matters because it revealed a shift in style. The Republic used mobs and blades. The Empire preferred medicine bowls with extra ingredients. Early Rome killed for law. Later Rome killed for convenience. Germanicus was not executed. He was erased, Nero's human torches. By 64 CE, Rome had just suffered the Great Fire. Most of the city burned. People needed someone to blame, and Emperor Nero did not want the finger pointed at his palace building plans. So he picked a group with no political power and no public sympathy: the early Christians. They were a small minority, disliked for not joining public rituals, and easy to frame as enemies of Roman tradition. Tacitus describes what happened next, and he was no Christian sympathizer. He wrote that Nero staged a public punishment display inside his own gardens. The executions were arranged as entertainment during evening events. Some victims were nailed to crosses. Others were sewn into animal skins and attacked by dogs. The most infamous group were coated in pitch or oil and set on fire at night to serve as lamps. This was not execution. This was stagecraft. Nero turned death into backyard lighting, and it worked as propaganda. The message was not subtle. The emperor could turn anyone into decoration if it pleased him. Even by Roman standards, this was excessive. Many senators hated Christians, but even they were uneasy. You do not usually see state power advertised through open humiliation unless the ruler is afraid of losing control. The irony is that Nero probably did not start the fire. Modern historians point to cramped wooden housing, wind, and poor firefighting systems as the real cause. But once rumors began spreading that Nero watched Rome burn, he panicked and reached for the oldest political trick in the imperial handbook: find a scapegoat with no army and no friends. Nero's punishments were meant to prove strength. Instead, they exposed insecurity. If an emperor needed to turn human beings into night torches to look powerful, he was not governing, he was performing. The cruelty here was not only in the deaths, it was in the framing. These people were not executed for a crime. They were props in a political theater production designed to rebuild Nero's image. The empire called it justice. Tacitus called it a spectacle. History calls it what it was: a ruler in meltdown mode, using public death as a distraction campaign. Vitellius, dumped like trash. By 69 CE, Rome was spinning through emperors like a broken slot machine. Nero died in 68. Galba took over, then got killed. Otho replaced him and also died. That left Aulus Vitellius, a man who loved banquets more than governing. He was emperor for 8 months, and most of that time, he was busy eating, celebrating, or pretending the empire was not on fire. When Vespasian's forces marched on Rome to replace him, Vitellius tried to abdicate. Not out of honor, out of fear. He signed a resignation, then changed his mind the next day, which was peak Roman leadership indecision. The people did not respect him. The Senate did not respect him. And the soldiers shifting allegiances treated him like a man already erased from history. Suetonius says that when the invaders reached the city, Vitellius tried to hide in a porter's lodge, disguised and shaking. He was dragged out anyway. This was not a formal arrest. This was a public manhandling of a sitting emperor by soldiers who had already decided he did not count. They dragged him through the streets of Rome, his clothes torn, his hair pulled. He was stabbed and beaten repeatedly. The crowd mocked him as he passed. He begged. That sealed the humiliation. Romans worshipped dignity in defeat. Vitellius displayed the opposite. He was hauled to the Gemonian steppes, a place used for disgraced criminals, and killed. No imperial burial, no honors. His body was dumped in the Tiber River. That disposal was symbolic. Throwing someone into the river meant they were beneath memory. It was not just death, it was deletion. Rome had killed emperors before, but it usually pretended there was some legal principle behind it. Here, there was no disguise. Vitellius was treated exactly the way Rome treated thieves, traitors, and nuisances. In one morning, the empire showed the entire population that the purple robe meant nothing if the soldiers got bored of you. This is the purest example of Roman politics in survival mode. No trial, no dignity, no illusion of fairness. Just mob rule with uniforms. Perpetua and Felicitas, faith on the killing floor. By 203 CE, Rome had a new problem: ordinary citizens refusing to worship state gods. For a religion-based government, that looked like civil disobedience. Christianity was still illegal, and local officials liked to prove loyalty by cracking down on it. In Carthage, 2 women became the most documented victims of these trials: Vibia Perpetua, a noblewoman in her early 20s, and Felicitas, an enslaved woman who was pregnant when arrested. Their story is not rumor. It is one of the rare ancient deaths preserved through a first-hand diary. Perpetua recorded her own imprisonment and trial. She refused to renounce her faith, even when her father begged her to think of her newborn child. The officials expected her to fold under emotional pressure. Instead, she told them she was not leaving the faith. Rome hated stubborn martyrs. They made the empire look weak. Because Felicitas was pregnant, Roman law delayed her execution until she gave birth. That detail alone shows how twisted Roman mercy could get. They waited to kill her so the procedure looked tidy. When the day arrived, they were marched into the arena. This was not justice. This was live entertainment. The crowd came to watch death like it was a sport. According to the Passio, Perpetua stayed steady even after she was gored by a wild animal. She helped straighten her clothing because she wanted to die with dignity rather than look panic-stricken. Felicitas also survived the animals at first, so the guards finished both women with a sword. The irony is that Rome wanted this to scare people. Instead, the records made them famous. A mob came to see a warning. History kept a testimony. This was Rome's version of public order. If a citizen obeyed the state, fine. If a citizen obeyed conscience instead, the arena would handle the rest. Not debate, not persuasion. A staged death in front of taxpayers. The empire believed fear kept everyone in line. What it actually did was turn certain victims into symbols that outlived the emperors who signed their warrants. Rome wanted silence. What it got was the most famous martyr text from antiquity. People say history repeats itself, but most of them have no idea how bad the first draft looked. These weren't executions. These were anatomy lessons the hard way. Assyria, skin tax. The Neo-Assyrian Empire earned its borders the hard way. They ruled by fear, and fear had branding value. Kings like Ashur-Nasir-Pal II left bragging inscriptions carved into palace walls listing what they did to rebels. One entry describes peeling captives alive and nailing the skin to a city gate. This wasn't rumor. These inscriptions are still visible in museums. Flaying served 2 goals: punishment and marketing. Rebels stopped rebelling when they saw what state policy looked like without paperwork. Assyria didn't negotiate. It skinned uprisings before they spread. Soldiers dragged prisoners into the public square. Skinning began from the feet upward because the legs have heavy nerve clusters. Death did not come fast. The victim stayed conscious while skin pulled off in sheets. Assyrian records don't hide the cruelty. Royal scribes listed how many towns were stripped in a campaign. The king treated pain like a census category. Captives who survived the first cuts still had hours before shock. The crowd saw every second. This was state theater before stadiums existed. Ashur-Nasir-Pal II ruled from 883 to 859 BCE. His palace at Kalhu displayed carved stone panels showing bound prisoners. The surviving slabs match his written reports. He didn't exaggerate. Archaeologists have the receipts. Skin wasn't tossed out either. It was stretched, dried, and stapled to walls as proof that disloyalty had a shelf life. Assyria paired torture with logistics. Cities that resisted lost their leaders. Cities that submitted kept their walls. Everyone understood the trade. No Senate debate. No appeals court. The knife was the memo. Later kings like Tiglath-Pileser III and Sennacherib kept the policy. Flaying became a diplomatic shortcut. When Assyria marched, news arrived early. People surrendered because they enjoyed having their skin attached. Death came from shock, bleeding, or infection if someone lasted long enough to be finished later. Worst case, guards salted the wounds to keep the victim awake. The empire called this correction. Everyone else called it survival training. Persia, living skewer. The Achaemenid Empire did not waste time with mild penalties. When Persia wanted a traitor gone, they turned him into l'un des cours. Impalement was the punishment for treason during the reign of Darius I, around the late 6th century BCE. Herodotus describes the penalty in the histories, and Persian royal inscriptions back him up. This was statecraft with a death timer. The victim was not stabbed. The stake entered from below. Guards greased the pole so the body slid upward without hitting vital organs too early. The worst part was time. A man could stay alive while skewered for 2 or 3 days. The weight of his own body dragged him down inch by inch, while organs tore themselves loose. The Assyrians used fear. The Persians perfected staging. Darius didn't hide this punishment behind palace walls. He placed impaled bodies next to roads or city gates. The message hit travelers before the tax collectors did. Crime prevention by billboard. Herodotus also recorded mass executions. After a revolt in Babylon, Darius ordered 3,000 people impaled at once. This wasn't rumor or legend. The decree appears in multiple ancient accounts. Persia liked paperwork. They archived everything. Officials chose placement carefully. The stake entered close to the rectum, then passed through the torso until it emerged through the shoulder or collar region. A fast death ruined the fun, so executioners trained for accuracy. The condemned hung upright while the pole stood planted in the ground. Air starvation blended with internal tearing. Nerves kept firing. Pain had stamina. Impalement also worked as a loyalty test. Villages that delivered rebels got tax protection. Villages that sheltered rebels got a skyline of human scarecrows. Darius believed fear made strong borders. It certainly created strong posture problems for the condemned. People sometimes asked why rebels didn't just fall off the stake. Because gravity worked against them. Downward pressure only drove the wood deeper. The body could not wriggle to freedom without finishing its own execution. Carthage and the fire pit deal. Carthage did not play soft diplomacy with the gods. The city believed protection came with payments, and the price could be a child. Archaeologists uncovered the Tophet of Carthage, a burial ground filled with thousands of urns containing burned infant remains and animal bones mixed with them. The Carthaginians said these were sacred offerings to Baal Hammon and Tanit. Greek and Roman writers called it state-run barbecue. Nobody agreed on the PR wording, but the outcome is not debated. The fire was real, and the victims were real. The ritual peaked between the 5th and 3rd centuries BCE. Families from elite households delivered the offering. This was not a punishment. It was a transaction. The priest placed the infant on a bronze surface heated by a furnace below. Inscriptions call it a vow payment. Carthage believed the god protected trade and warfare in return. You give an heir, you get a favor. Modern scholars once asked whether this was smear propaganda from Rome. Then the excavation log said otherwise. The urn count passed 20,000. Many bones show cremation temperatures higher than a funeral pyre. This was not accidental death. The pattern proves intentional burning in ritual context. Some ceremonies happened during famine or wartime panic, when citizens hoped for divine rescue. Others appear routine. Records found at the site include inscriptions naming parents and dedicating the child to fulfillment of the vow. This was devotion with a receipt. The pain involved is simple to understand. Infants do not die instantly from fire exposure. The priests controlled airflow, so the heat seared before smoke suffocation. The ritual needed witnesses. The community saw the act and believed the city purchased survival. Carthage did not hide this. Visitors described bronze statues of the deity with outstretched arms slanting down toward the furnace. When priests released the offering, gravity handled the rest. The noise was part of the ritual. Carved markers show symbols of gratitude from families who believed the god answered. Rome eventually destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE. Roman writers weaponized the story as evidence of barbarity. Yet the ground under the ruins confirmed the practice long before historians finished arguing. Carthage paid its insurance bill directly to the firebox. The brazen bull. Sicily produced wheat, wine, and one of the worst appliances in ancient history. Around the late 6th century BCE, a tyrant named Phalaris ruled the Greek city of Akragas. He wanted a trophy that made people fear his name more than his army. An inventor named Perilaus proposed a bronze bull built as a hollow furnace. A man could be locked inside while a fire burned underneath. The metal heated until it cooked the victim alive. The design came with audio features. Tubes inside the head transformed screams into a low bellowing sound. The goal was not disposal. The goal was display. Phalaris accepted the invention and gave Perilaus a test run. According to ancient sources, the tyrant tried the device on the inventor himself. It was product testing with terrible customer care. Writers like Diodorus, Siculus, and Pindar described the bull during antiquity. No surviving specimen exists today, but the accounts match each other across multiple authors. The myth level is low, the cruelty level is high. Every technical detail matches known Greek metallurgy. The device was possible and historically plausible. The condemned entered through a door on the side. The door sealed tight to trap heat. Bronze conducts temperature fast, so the walls scorched skin within moments. Death did not arrive quickly. The person cooked while alive. Nerves kept firing until organs lost function. When the fire ended, the corpse fused to the inner walls. Removal required scraping. Phalaris used the device to warn anyone with ambition. People feared his court because a conversation could become a roast. Ancient writers treated him as the template for tyranny. Even Greek comedy referenced the bull as shorthand for Public meltdown. Stories say Phalaris was eventually overthrown and thrown into his own invention. Even if that detail came from poetic justice, the device itself was not allegory. Greece documented it because it shocked even people from a violent age. Rome and the slow hang. Rome treated execution like roadside maintenance. Crucifixion was not a single moment of death. It was a long collapse of the body while gravity squeezed the lungs into failure. The method existed before Rome, but Rome industrialized it. By the 1st century BCE, it was routine for slaves, rebels, and anyone the state considered disposable. The condemned first absorbed a beating. The whip used bone and metal fragments tied into the cords. Skin opened before the cross even appeared. When the victim reached the site, soldiers nailed or tied the arms to the crossbeam. The legs bent just enough to keep a person alive longer. A fast death ruined the lesson. Roman jurists called it crucifixio lenta, slow crucifixion. Seneca wrote that some people waited for death while begging for it to hurry. Josephus recorded mass crucifixions during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. He said, "Crosses filled the landscape because the soldiers ran out of space, not enthusiasm. Pain escalated with every breath. The rib cage could not lift unless the legs pushed upward. Every push scraped nails through bone and tendon. When the legs failed, breathing stalled. Suffocation mixed with blood loss and dehydration. Hours stretched into days. Many victims died under the sun without water. Others collapsed from organ failure. Executions were public. Crowds walked past and saw the body sag, rise, and sag again. Roman commanders placed crucifixions beside highways or city gates, so travelers memorized the penalty. The empire used signage before billboards existed. The message required no translation. Archaeologists uncovered a crucified skeleton in Givat HaMivtar in 1968. A nail still pierced the heel bone. The discovery confirmed the written accounts down to the angle of the feet. This was not symbolism. It was procedure. Soldiers sometimes broke the legs to speed the ending. Without leg support, breathing collapsed in minutes. That detail shows how precise the system was. They could lengthen suffering or shorten it with a single crack. China and the sliced sentence. Early imperial China handled treason with a menu of punishments, and some came in installments. By the 1st century CE, the Han dynasty used staged mutilation for crimes against the throne. This was the prototype of lynching, later called death by 1,000 cuts. The name became famous centuries later, but the policy began here as a legal penalty written in state codes. The Han government believed pain measured loyalty. If a man threatened the emperor took him apart in front of everyone. The cuts came in sequence. Executioners avoided vital organs during the early stages. They carved flesh from arms, chest, or thighs while the victim stayed conscious. Guards restrained movement with ropes while a clerk read the charges aloud. Bureaucracy stayed active right up to the last nerve. Han law counted mutilation as both punishment and public education. Crowds watched from a platform. The state treated fear like civic infrastructure. Early medical texts from the same era describe how long a body survives when bleeding is controlled. The executioners used that knowledge in reverse. They cut shallow at first, deep later. Death came only after the point had been made. Evidence of this policy appears in the Book of Han and later commentaries describing imperial justice. The details track with archaeological finds of restraints and execution grounds. Later dynasties copied the structure and intensified it. The Han built the outline. The Song and Ming filled in the chapters. The suffering happened in stages because the process doubled as political theater. A fast death wasted a demonstration. The victim bled, shook, and endured shock while the court made its announcement. When the final blow came, the audience already understood the message. The body became a civic announcement. This punishment targeted treason, adultery with royalty, or high-level corruption. The state wanted humiliation first and death second. Pain was the product. The corpse was the receipt. Masada and the siege diet. Masada was not an execution chamber, but it delivered the same result with slower pacing. In 73 CE, a Roman legion surrounded the desert fortress during the First Jewish-Roman War. The defenders were Sicarii rebels, led by Eleazar ben Yair. They had walls, grain, weapons, and pride. They did not have time. Rome built a siege ramp and sealed every path to water. Thirst did more work than the sword. Josephus recorded the event in the Jewish War, and archaeology backs him up. Excavations found Roman camps, still etched into the ground like scars. You can stand at the site today and see the layout. It is a battlefield frozen in place. The Romans starved the stronghold from the outside. Heat roasted the rebels from the inside. The fortress became a pressure cooker. Starvation doesn't kill first. Dehydration gets there early. The brain swells, muscles seize, speech drags into slurry, the body starts mining itself for energy. Fat goes first, then organs line up. Day after day, strength drains while the enemy enjoys shade and supply trains. The Romans waited because Rome could always wait. A siege was cheaper than street fighting. The defenders watched the ramp grow higher every week. The morale curve dipped with the water jar. People who fought legions for years now fought their own selves. By the final days, resistance was a math problem. No one rescues a fortress surrounded by a full legion. Josephus says the rebels chose mass suicide rather than public display under Roman chains. Whether the count was exact or stylized, the final state of the fortress matched the record. Wide silence, food debris, burn layers, no survivors walking out. The suffering was not theatrical, it was metabolic. There was no crowd cheering, there was only dry heat and a body tearing itself apart for fuel. The death rate matched your hydration schedule. If the sun wanted you gone early, it signed the paperwork. Persia and the bug buffet. If Persia had a deluxe punishment tier, scaphism was the upgrade package. The case most often cited comes from the 4th century BCE, under Artaxerxes II. A soldier named Mithridates bragged that he killed the king's brother. The king wanted a punishment that stretched longer than a speech, so they gave him the full treatment: confinement, rot, and insects with excellent attendance. The condemned went between 2 hollowed wooden shells or boats. Only the head, arms, and legs stuck out. The guards force-fed a mixture of milk and honey until diarrhea started. This attracted flies. The mess coated the body. The sun baked it into a glue trap. Every insect in the district filed a meal request. The goal was not quick decay. The guards kept the man alive with more honey and more liquid. Dehydration mixed with digestive failure. Flesh softened. Maggots entered open sores. Herodotus did not invent this. The description comes from later Greek and Persian chroniclers, whose accounts converge on the same steps: restraint, feeding, swarming, and an audience of crawling mouths. The torment lasted days. Some reports say more than a week. There is no escape reflex. Movement only smears more waste across the skin. Bugs arrive in layers. First flies, then beetles, then larvae. The victim becomes habitat. Medical historians confirm how long a human body can remain conscious while infection spreads from the surface inward. Pain does not taper, it stacks. The punishment targeted traitors because ordinary execution could feel polite by comparison. The empire believed humiliation should outlive the victim. Scaphism made death look like demolition from the outside in. Historians debate which chronicler preserved the original timing, but all agree on the structure. The body became a living buffet until organs failed. Sun exposure burned the skin, while insects chewed through it. Shock came later than expected because the feeding kept the heart working. Preservation through agony. India and the copper pot. The Delhi Sultanate handled rebellion with boiling water you did not want to test. By the 13th and early 14th century, sultans like Alauddin Khalji used a punishment known in court chronicles as tafrih bi tanur, or relief by furnace, which was relief for the audience, not the prisoner. Chroniclers such as Ziauddin Barani and Amir Khusrau documented how offenders were lowered into a copper cauldron filled with water or oil while fires raged beneath. It was kitchen physics with a treason surcharge. The executioners worked in stages, a fast dunk wasted spectacle. The condemned first sat on a beam or platform above the pot. Steam blistered the skin before contact. Then guards lowered the victim slowly using ropes so the legs cooked while the chest still breathed. Burning nerves kept the mind awake. Death stalled until the torso dipped. Water boiled at a predictable pace. The cauldron made suffering measurable. Bubbles signaled when the crowd was ready for phase 2. If the execution called for oil, the temperature climbed faster, and flesh separated from bone, while the lungs still fought for air. Records mention heads rising back up from the pot before sinking for good. The option of screaming existed until steam removed that opportunity. Barani wrote that Khalji used this penalty for rebels and counterfeiters, which says everything about his priority list. The same cauldron disciplined traitors and bad accountants. No bureaucracy, no appeal. The pot ruled. The spectacle worked because everyone could smell it. Burning oil and skin carried down wind. This ensured people who skipped the execution still received the news. The Sultanate saved on flyers. The chronicles match known metallurgy of the era. Large hammered copper kettles existed for mass cooking in garrisons. Converting one into state enforcement required no engineering leap. When people say the law has teeth, this one had a heating coil. The target often died from shock before organs fully liquefied, but not always. The unlucky lasted long enough for the crowd to watch skin peel. If someone fainted too soon, guards pulled him up to prolong the process. Efficiency did not outrank spectacle. The Mongol carpet press. The Mongol Empire did not leave much room for legal nuance. They crushed rivals the same way they crushed borders, by removing resistance with no cleanup required. For nobles or royals, however, bloodshed had rules. Spilling noble blood was taboo under steppe custom. So the Mongols created a workaround. They killed without spilling anything. The method used carpets, boards, or felt mats stacked over the body while men or horses applied pressure until bones folded. Sources such as Juvayni and Rashid al-Din recorded this method during the 13th and early 14th centuries. It appears in cases against rival khans and governors who fell out of favor. The condemned lay flat while heavy surfaces pinned him. The weight forced ribs into lungs and spine against the ground. No blade, no cut, just steady compression until the internal structure looked like broken scaffolding. Death arrived through suffocation or catastrophic organ crush. The head sometimes survived the longest, producing a slow fade instead of a sudden stop. Because there was no bleeding, the execution counted as clean. It met the letter of tradition, while violating the spirit with enthusiasm. The Mongols did not bother with permanent execution grounds. They used whatever surface stood nearby. The carpet became both tool and legal loophole. War captives could expect arrows. Nobles got upholstery. A man could be crushed under boards or under soldiers standing in rotation. Horses sometimes trotted over the platform for faster progress. Tradition is tradition, but efficiency has friends. This punishment had political function. It removed a rival without insulting his clan by visibly spilling blood. Alliances stayed tidy even when the bones did not. The empire used public death as diplomacy. No crowd needed to watch the gore, because there was none to see. The damage stayed internal. The message did not. Chroniclers describe this fate, hitting generals who lost expensive battles, or relatives who backed the wrong claimant. The Khan's court worked like a performance review. If your rating dropped low enough, you became pavement. Later states copied the technique, especially in Central Asia, because loopholes travel faster than culture. The Mongols gave the world the worst massage on record. It kept the body intact for burial, but the owner left the building. Carpet execution was gentle only in marketing. The empire avoided blood for religious reasons. Everything else got flattened. From Viking lung displays to Carthaginian child fires, ancient civilizations didn't just punish. They made sure you were never remembered the same way again. These aren't just deaths. They're historical nightmares, and every single one of them actually happened. The Sumerian nail impalement. So, you steal temple grain, fudge a tax record, or insult the king. In modern times, you'd get a fine or maybe a prison cell. But in Sumer, you got nailed. Literally. On a stick. In public. Welcome to Lagash, around 2400 BCE. One of the earliest documented cities with a fully functioning legal system and zero chill. Their version of crime control was short, sharp, and horrifying. The punishment? Impalement. No metaphors here. The body was hoisted onto a wooden stake, probably through the abdomen or chest, and displayed for all to see. This wasn't symbolic, it was the message. The earliest known visual of this method comes from the Stele of the Vultures, a carved limestone slab from Gursu. It shows bodies hanging like gruesome banners, lined up neatly on spikes after a war between Lagash and their farming rivals from Umma. King Eannatum led that campaign, and historians believe he used impalement not just for soldiers, but for rebels, looters, and anyone dumb enough to challenge temple property laws. And they had laws. Cuneiform records written in wedge-shaped symbols talk about penalties for everything, from tax dodging to sacrilege. Several tablets from the city of mention nailing as the outcome for crimes like defiling a shrine or rebelling against the king's word. That meant death by impalement, then public display at the city gate. You became scenery. Unlike later empires, the Sumerians didn't add flair. No ritual chants, no drawn-out speeches. They skewered you, stood you upright, and let the flies do the rest. Experts say the average person might have survived for hours, possibly longer, depending on how the stake was placed. Archaeologists found human remains near city walls that showed deliberate positioning, not a burial. These weren't accidents, they were warnings. Sumer invented the wheel and writing, but they also invented a brutal version of "don't mess with us." And thanks to stone tablets and artistic receipts, we know exactly what happened when you crossed the line. Retainer sacrifice in early dynastic Egypt. In today's job market, people quit for bad hours or a toxic boss. In early dynastic Egypt, you died when your boss did. On purpose. With ceremony. Around 2900 BCE, under Pharaoh Jer, possibly Egypt's third king of the first dynasty, the concept of loyalty took a deadly turn. Archaeologists excavating at Abydos found something that made jaws drop and spines freeze. Over 300 human graves neatly arranged around the king's burial chamber. These weren't mass burials. Each person had their own tomb, grave goods, and in some cases, jewelry. Translation: these people weren't slaves, they were high-status retainers, and they were sacrificed. Jair's tomb alone had at least 318 auxiliary burials, according to W.B. Emery's detailed archaeological reports. Some victims appear to have been strangled, possibly with linen cords, and carefully buried shortly after death. No broken bones, no signs of a struggle. Just bodies placed with precision, as if they'd volunteered to clock out of life permanent. But they didn't volunteer. These were likely court servants, nurses, cooks, guards, and even musicians. When the pharaoh died, they were killed so they could serve him in the afterlife. Think of it as an ancient office culture where quitting wasn't an option, and HR wore linen shrouds. And it wasn't just Jair. His predecessors, like King Aha, also had dozens of retainers buried alongside them. Tomb Uj, possibly belonging to the mysterious proto-king Scorpion I, revealed bodies with evidence of decapitation, not for rebellion, just for proximity to power. For 3 generations, this deadly tradition continued. Pharaoh dies, his staff dies with him, but eventually, even Egypt realized this was getting out of hand. By the end of the Second Dynasty, Pharaoh Khasekhemwy's tomb included Shabti figurines, small statues meant to work for him in the afterlife. Plastic employees, ancient edition. Much cheaper. Much less bloody. So next time your boss sends a passive-aggressive email, remember, at least you're not being strangled and buried in his tomb. Progress. The Hittite burning ritual. The Hittites ran their empire like a strict school with a flamethrower. They had rules, hundreds of them, etched into clay tablets. And if you broke one in a way that offended the gods, fire. Somewhere around 1400 BCE, the Hittites were ruling much of Anatolia, now modern-day Turkey. Their legal codes, especially tablets from the capital Hattusa, didn't hold back. Among the most terrifying lines in the Code of the Hittites, burning as a punishment for certain religious crimes. And we're not talking symbolic burning here. We're talking actual live immolation, sometimes done in public, always with purpose. The Hittites were obsessed with purity, ritual, spiritual, and political. If someone insulted a temple, defiled sacred space, or violated oaths to the gods, they weren't just killed. They were given to the fire. One tablet outlines the punishment for desecrating temple food. The offender shall not live and be burned in a ritual cleansing. This wasn't daily justice. Regular criminals got fines, lashes, or exile. But blasphemers? They got flames. There are records of priests and scribes performing fire ceremonies where condemned individuals were burned to appease angry gods, especially the storm god Tarhunt. And this wasn't clean or quick. It wasn't supposed to be. The burning was both punishment and purification, a violent reset button. Victims were sometimes burned at the edge of temples, where offerings were made. Their deaths were meant to carry the spiritual weight of cleansing the community. It's worth noting, the Hittites didn't use this on political rebels or common thieves. This was sacred punishment, aimed squarely at those seen as spiritual threats. Think heretics, oath-breakers, and people who insulted divine order. Archaeologists have found charred human remains in and near ceremonial fire pits in sites like Yazilikaya and Alaka Huyu. While we can't assign each bone to a crime, the placement and context match with ritual descriptions in the tablets. So, yes, the Hittites were legal pioneers. But if you ever find yourself time-traveling to Bronze Age Anatolia, here's a tip. Don't mess with the temple bread, or the gods might bake you. Tower crucifixion in Achaemenid Persia. Persia had palaces, postal systems, and some of the worst ways to die if you annoyed the king. Top of the list? Crucifixion. But this wasn't Rome yet. The Persians did it higher, slower, and with extra humiliation. Let's rewind to 522 BCE, when Darius I had just taken the throne. It wasn't peaceful. A rebel named Nidintubel popped up in Babylon claiming to be the long-lost King Nebuchadnezzar III. That went over poorly. Darius crushed the rebellion and made sure nobody forgot it. According to the Behistun inscription, a trilingual rock-carved record Darius left like a Bronze Age press release, the fake king was captured and publicly crucified. Now, Persian crucifixion wasn't the same as the Roman version. They didn't nail people to T-shaped crosses. They used wooden beams or tall stakes, often placing them high above city gates or on towers. Why? So the corpse could hang there for days, rotting in the sun, visible to everyone, a warning from 40 feet up. Greek historians backed it up. Herodotus, not exactly subtle, said Darius had tens of thousands of men crucified in Babylon after one revolt. That's not poetic language, that's logistics. Thousands of vertical poles lined up outside the city, each with a body swinging from it like some horrific fence. And it wasn't just for rebels. Persian law under Darius allowed crucifixion for soldiers who deserted, nobles who plotted coups, and even corrupt officials. According to Ctesias, another Greek source, one corrupt judge was flayed alive and then nailed to a post made of his own skin, creative HR. This method didn't end with Darius. His successors, including Xerxes, used it during military campaigns. After the failed invasion of Greece, Xerxes reportedly crucified his own engineers for screwing up a bridge over the Hellespont. Harsh Yelp review. Now, if you were climbing the political ladder in Achaemenid Persia, here's the rule. Don't fake your resume. Darius didn't just end your rebellion, he hung you on a pole and carved your failure into stone. Literally. Scaphism, the Persian death that took days. If crucifixion was the Persian billboard for traitors, Scaphism was the underground horror show. No spikes and swords, only milk, honey, and bugs. And it may be the slowest, grossest execution ever recorded. The story comes from Plutarch, who, in Life of Artaxerxes, gives a detailed and very real account of what happened to a Persian soldier named Mithridates around 401 BCE. His crime? He accidentally bragged that he, not the king's brother Cyrus, killed a rival in battle. Big mistake. The king, Artaxerxes II, decided to make him an example. A long, slow, squirming one. Here's how it worked. The condemned was placed between two hollowed-out wooden boats or logs, exposing only the head, hands, and feet. Then, he was force-fed milk and honey until he developed massive, uncontrollable diarrhea. The executioners then smeared more milk and honey over his exposed skin and left him floating in a stagnant swamp. The result? Insects. Thousands of them. They didn't just bite. They nested. They burrowed. They laid eggs in his skin, mouth, and eyes. Every day, the victim was cleaned up just enough to keep him alive, then fed again, and again, and again. According to Plutarch, Mithridates lasted 17 days before finally dying. 17 days. That's over 2 weeks of rot, infection, madness, and slow digestion by insects. It wasn't just physical torture, it was psychological annihilation. Historians have debated whether this punishment was common. There's no evidence it was widespread. It wasn't used on peasants or petty thieves. This was a royal punishment, reserved for people who insulted the king or committed grave political blunders. A method so vile, it didn't need to be used often, but just whispered about. And while Plutarch was Greek, other sources confirm similar punishment styles involving entrapment, exposure, and forced feeding as a form of ritual disgrace. Scapism wasn't about killing someone fast. It was about turning a man into a feast for the natural world and letting everyone know. Persia knew how to build roads, irrigate deserts, and manage empires, but they also invented a death so slow. Even crucifixion looked like mercy. Carthaginian child sacrifice. You've heard of ancient gods demanding loyalty. In Carthage, they demanded something else. Your child. And yes, this really happened. Around 300 BCE, the city of Carthage, modern-day Tunisia, was thriving. Powerful navy, booming trade, fancy purple dyes. But behind the marble temples sat a place called the Tophet. It looked like a peaceful cemetery. It wasn't. It was a ritual sacrifice zone, and most of the bodies buried there were children. Ancient writers didn't pull punches. Diodorus Siculus wrote that when Carthage faced disaster, plague, famine, military loss, they believed their god Baal-Hamon was angry. And the only way to fix it? Burn children alive, not figuratively, actually, in a bronze furnace shaped like a god with outstretched arms. You'd place the child in the statue's hands. The priest pulled a lever. The child rolled into a pit of fire. Some kids were volunteered by wealthy families trying to impress the gods. Others, historians think, were poor or enslaved. Carthaginian elites even claimed they were sacrificing surrogates, children raised for this. Nice try, the bones don't lie. In the 20th century, skeptics said Roman authors made this up to smear Carthage. Then, archaeologists started digging. What they found? Thousands of urns in the Tophets of Carthage, Motia, and other Punic sites are packed with charred infant bones and animal remains. Some were newborns, others were toddlers. Studies by archaeologist Lawrence Steger and others proved that the high number of cremated infants couldn't be explained by natural death. The bones were burned at high heat, consistent with large-scale, open-air fire pits or furnaces. And get this, many urns had inscriptions like, "Offering to Baal." No ambiguity. This was child sacrifice. There's even a chilling ritual term, mulk, used in Phoenician texts to describe the offering. It literally means a gift. Eventually, Roman forces obliterated Carthage in 146 BCE, leveling the city. But by then, thousands of children had already been given to the fire in the name of cosmic balance. The Roman poena cruelty, death by sack. The Romans were obsessed with order. Kill your neighbor? You might get a sword. Kill your father? You got the sack, literally. The punishment was called poena cruelty, Latin for penalty of the sack, and it was the Roman Republic's way of saying parricide is the worst thing you can do. Forget crucifixion, forget exile. If you killed your dad, or mom, or grandparent, Rome turned your execution into a bizarre animal-filled nightmare. Here's how it worked. First, you were beaten with rods. Then, you were sewn into a leather sack with 4 animals: a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. The symbolism? No one's exactly sure. The dog represented madness, the monkey chaos, the snake betrayal, and the rooster, you guessed it, constant screaming. Basically, you were locked in a screaming, biting, writhing sack of poetic justice. Once sewn in, the sack, called a culeus, was tossed into the Tiber River, or the sea if they felt dramatic. You drowned, but not before the monkey clawed your face and the snake did its thing. In Roman terms, that was total erasure. This wasn't a myth. It's recorded in the Digest of Justinian, a massive Roman law code, and referenced by Cicero, who defended a man accused of parricide. It was used in real Roman courts and carried out for centuries. Even Emperor Hadrian revived it in the 2nd century CE for dramatic effect. Sometimes, if animals weren't available, they improvised. There are records of criminals sewn up solo or with fewer animals. But the symbolism stuck. Parricide didn't just break the law, it shattered the natural order. And Rome made sure you paid for it with every squawk and hiss. It was so specific, so theatrical, and so uniquely Roman that even other brutal civilizations didn't copy it. Leave it to Rome to turn a murder trial into a zoo-themed drowning show. Slow slicing in Han Dynasty China. In ancient China, they didn't just punish you, they processed you. And if your crime was big enough, like treason, desertion, or insulting the emperor, they had a punishment to match: slow slicing, the prototype of what later became known as lingqi. We're in the Western Han Dynasty, around 100 BCE, when Emperor Wu was cracking down on threats, real or imagined. While the fully ritualized lingqi wouldn't be formalized until the Song Dynasty, early Han texts already describe executions involving gradual dismemberment, piece by piece, while the victim was still alive. The official term? Lingqi, or cut punishment. It was written into legal codes for crimes that offended both the state and heaven. Unlike your standard beheading or hanging, this was reserved for traitors and especially hated criminals. Why? Because in Chinese belief, a whole body was needed for a proper afterlife. The method? First, the prisoner was tied upright. Then, the executioner would slice off the flesh in sections, starting with the arms, the chest, and sometimes even the face. Internal organs were left for last. It wasn't quick. That was the point. You died in stages, fully aware, as each cut robbed you of dignity, life, and afterlife. A few ancient commentaries mention criminals being cut into 8 pieces. Not metaphor, that was the plan, and your family, also punished. Your sons could be enslaved, your name banned from being written down. You didn't just lose your life, you lost legacy. Records from this time also describe exemplary punishments, where the condemned were displayed publicly during slicing. Townsfolk were encouraged to watch, children included. By the time of the Tang and Song dynasties, lingqi got more elaborate, sometimes involving hundreds of cuts. But the Han set the tone: execution as erasure, not just of a body, but of a soul. So no, the Han dynasty wasn't just about calligraphy and Confucianism. It also pioneered one of history's most methodical forms of public dismemberment. And if your final moments involved a crowd counting your body parts, you were probably already dead, in every way that mattered. Maya heart extraction ritual. The Maya gave us calendars, pyramids, and math. They also gave us one of the most efficient ways to lose your heart, literally. Because if you were a prisoner of war, or a human offering during certain festivals, you weren't walking away, you were getting carved open on an altar, while still breathing. By 900 CE, in cities like Chichen Itza and Uxmal, the Maya were performing ritual heart extractions at major temples. This wasn't some back-alley sacrifice. It was state-sponsored religion, often tied to agricultural cycles, calendar rituals, or honoring gods like Kawil and Chak. Here's how it worked. The victim, usually a captured warrior, slave, or even a high-status noble, was painted blue, a color symbolizing death and sacrifice. He was brought to the top of a pyramid, often the temple of Kukulkan, where a priest would lay him flat on a stone altar, sometimes bending his chest over a curved slab for easier access. Then came the blade. Obsidian or flint, razor-sharp but brittle. The priest would make a vertical cut through the chest, reach in and remove the still-beating heart. Yes, this is real. Spanish conquistadors like Diego de Landa and later chroniclers wrote about it in grim detail, and Maya carvings and murals back it up, showing the scene repeatedly, like a spiritual instruction manual. The heart was then offered to the gods, either burned as incense or placed on a sacred plate. In some cases, the body was tossed down the temple stairs, a final flourish to the ceremony. Fun fact? Some bodies were later flayed or decapitated as part of additional rituals, especially during ball games, where winners, or losers, were sometimes sacrificed too. Archaeologists have found human remains at Maya temples showing chest incisions, cut ribs, and missing sternums, physical proof that this wasn't just legend. It was practiced for centuries, deeply tied to Maya beliefs about feeding the gods and maintaining cosmic balance. To the Maya, sacrifice wasn't cruelty. It was currency, a way to keep the sun rising and the crops growing. But for the guy on the altar, let's be honest, he didn't care about balance. He just lost the worst lottery in history, and his heart paid the price. The Viking blood eagle. You've heard of Viking raids, but have you heard of the execution that made even warriors flinch? It was called the blood eagle, and if the sagas are even halfway true, it wasn't just a death. It was a performance. The blood eagle shows up in Icelandic texts like the Tale of Ragnar's Sons and the Orkneyinga saga, written a couple centuries after the events they describe. The setup? A high-status enemy commits treason, kills a family member, or breaks an oath. The punishment? You get turned into an offering with your back wide open. Here's how it allegedly went. The victim was tied face down. Then, the executioner used a sharp blade, probably a CX or long knife, to slice open the rib cage from the spine, separating the ribs like wings. Each rib was pulled outward. The lungs were then dragged out through the opening and laid over the ribs, fluttering like wings. Hence, the eagle. Was it fast? Not even close. The point was to keep the person alive during the process, at least through the rib carving. The ultimate humiliation was making the lungs appear to flap, while the person still gasped for air. You weren't just being killed. You were being displayed like a grotesque banner of dishonor. One of the most famous alleged victims was King Ella of Northumbria, the guy who killed legendary Viking Ragnar Lothbrok. According to the sagas, Ragnar's sons captured Ella and performed the blood eagle on him as revenge. Whether it really happened? Still debated. But the ritual pops up in multiple texts, usually as punishment for oath-breaking or regicide, the worst crimes in Viking law. Skeptics say it's a literary invention, more poetic than practical. But some historians argue it could be physically possible, if horrifying. At least partial versions of it. Either way, it was meant to terrify. There's no archaeological proof yet, no carved-back skeletons have been found, but the idea of a death so gruesome it survives centuries of storytelling? That says something. Whether fully real or slightly embellished, the blood eagle remains one of the darkest executions ever whispered through history. Not just because of what it did to the body, but because of what it did to the reputation of anyone who saw it. In Viking culture, honor was everything, but this was how you ended someone forever. So here you are, about to make your genius idea to save the world. In your hand is the cure for cancer, and it is ready to be mass distributed for the world to take. But one day before the distribution, you were mixing the scientific thingamajigs, and you suddenly bumped a poison and poured it all in the mixture. The cure starts bubbling, and you made the Powerpuff Girls. Point is, you can make some oopsies, but nothing compared to these experiments. Mengelé's twins. During the Second World War, the you-know-who was really insisting on making the Aryan race the super-duper race in all mankind with their blonde and silky smooth hair, blue eyes, at least 6 feet tall, and pointed noses. He hated the Jews so much that he unknowingly prepared Germany for Miss Universe or something. One way that the Führer wanted to keep the Aryan race a super-duper race was by, well, multiplying them. And one doctor, let's call him Josef Mengele, had the brilliant idea to genetically prove that Aryans the supreme race of all mankind. And what better subjects can he use than, you guessed it, Aryans. But not just any Aryan, but Aryan twins. By the way, fun fact, Aryans are not Europeans. They never are. It's an Asian race. So Dr. Mengele personally selected his guinea pigs from the many trains that just arrived to Auschwitz, you know, the concentration camp. The twins he handpicked were promised something like, "Hey there, you two are twins. You're gonna have a good stay here at Auschwitz. This is the life." Turned out, those were lies. The place these twins slept in were basically just the same with the rest of the camps, just with windows, and that was about it. The windowed place didn't even last long for them when Josef Mengele started examining these pairs medically. They got measured, their photos were taken, and everything was written on paper. He even took lots of blood samples from these twins that most of them got anemic as hell. That was already downright wrong, but it was just the start. Mengele removed internal organs of these twins, cut their limbs, and then took one blood, then gave it to the other.
Why? That sounds like something straight out of the human centipede.
To see results, simply just to see what would happen. And the twins couldn't even refuse these things because of two things. Most of them were children, and the other was they'd get a Luger through their heads. A Luger is a gun that Swastika Boyce used to have. That's all you need to know about it. Speaking of human centipede, he also tried connecting twins, like legit, physically by sewing them together. That didn't end well because it hurt, and it killed the twins with the infections. Just to really insist that the super-duper race of mankind was the Aryan race, he even dyed the eyes of these twins to change their eye color. Take note, these were the times when contact lenses weren't a thing. And I'd also assume that based from the amount of monstrosity Joseph Mengele did, he won't resort to contact lenses since he wanted that organic blonde, blue-eyed, 6-foot, pointed nose race. Now deeper and deeper into the war, Mengele was becoming more desperate to prove the superiority of the race he so loved. Spoiler, he never did prove it, but his desperation led his team to give diseases to these twins on purpose. Very nice, Joseph. Very nice. In the end, he was just another one of Chaplin impersonator's lackeys that got way over his head. But hey, they killed thousands of pairs of twins just for this experiment. Stubbins Firth's yellow fever. One thing though, before I start telling how stupid of an experiment this was. What's up with that last name? Firth? Why did it have two same letters? And why did it have to be both consonants? At least make it a vowel, like, aardvark or something? Firth sounds like you wanted to say the word first, but you accidentally bit your tongue before you got to open your mouth. Anyway, enough of that. It's stupid yet serious experiments time. It was so stupid, you won't believe it was serious. So Stubbins Firth was a researcher back in the 19th century, and this experiment of his was definitely something you would not dare to try. He wanted to prove that yellow fever wasn't contagious. He was right. It wasn't contagious. But Jesus Christ, the way he proved it, missed the mark so hard. As you know, or probably not, yellow fever was a big thing back then. Stubbins Firth's first observation about it was, hey, why is yellow fever only affecting so many in the summer and not during the winter? This must be something environmental. I'll probably call Greta Thunberg and see if it's real.
Why me? Because I care for the world? How dare you?
To further prove his point, he decided to experiment on himself. I'm looking at this like I'm going to drink water, and if I get thirsty later, then water is useless. Or I'm going to freeze this water in the fridge, and if it turns into ice, then climate change is not real type of experiment. Stubbins, my boy, legit injected himself with a yellow fever patient's vomit. Vomit! Like it being vomit alone was already disgusting, let alone a yellow fever patient's vomit. Thank freaking goodness he didn't get any infection from that stunt. Well, there's your answer, Stubbins. It's not contagious, so stop. Nope, he's doing another one. He's now pouring the vomit into his eyes, inhaling boiled vomit, and drinking it all at the same time. Dude, what the hell? I'll just give y'all a quick science lesson because all this vomit is making me want to vomit myself. So, yellow fever is actually delivered by the same mosquito that can give you dengue. That's about the only way yellow fever can be transmitted. Stubbins definitely didn't know about that, because I swear to God, he won't be able to stomach the vomit if he did know, and definitely vomit the vomit.
Well, that was disgusting, but that didn't give me any yellow fever. I need to try more things.
No. What are you doing? I legit already said. Time for blood! So you're going full-on vampire now? Man, stop. Dude, it's freaking piss. Stop. Oh my goodness. Dude.
Nope. Time for saliva.
You know what? You can get saliva from just smooching with your girl, but in the name of science, just drink it. Bon appetit, I guess. So yeah, he still didn't get the yellow fever, and he thought he just made a smart move doing all those, so he published the research about it. Let me guess. The title of it was Mukbang: How I Didn't Get Yellow Fever from Drinking Every Possible Liquid a Human Can Release. It went totally wrong. Just wrong, man. At least the continental drift theory is somehow possible. Stubbins Firth's research was completely debunked in the 1900s. All that only to get myth busted. Operation LAC in Missouri. This happened in the early 1950s, just a few years after the Second World War ended. It's understandable that the entire world is still on guard and is probably mustering up more powerful weapons during this time. Oppenheimer was partially to blame for this, because he introduced the atomic bomb to the world. Now from that point, everyone did their research on nuclear warheads. USA, being the first one to have an actual battle experience with nukes, had the idea that if they can attack with nukes, they should also know how to defend nuke attacks from other countries should it ever happen again. And to learn how to defend, the government was like, okay, we need to know what the effects of these thingamajigs first, so we know what to do, and started Operation LAC. It was a secret radioactive test, and what happened here was they sprayed zinc-cadmium sulfide over many urban places in Missouri. But the thing is, no one in the state knew about it, except for the government. The military would use blowers on rooftops to spray these zinc thingy. Oh well, to protect the people, you must attack the people. When the people of St. Louis knew about this thing, they were of course mad as hell. The back and forth of the people and the government probably went something like this. Why didn't you tell us about this? You could have told us that you wanted to kill St. Louis, so we just did it ourselves. We didn't want to tell you because you'd panic. If we didn't tell you that we're gonna overthrow the president and secretly did it, you'll panic too. You dumbass. Besides the no-notice thing, zinc-cadmium sulfide was another problem. It was an addictive and poisonous combination of elements. It can affect the lungs, kidneys, and bones. The US knew about that stuff, but they did it anyway. Smart move. Einstein would be proud. It was so smart that after the spraying, the particles of this stayed on the roofs of houses, schools, playgrounds, basically everywhere. Lots of these particles were eventually found in the poorer areas of St. Louis. So you really want to think if this was the test run for the purge or something. As time passed, the people began having health issues. Surprise, surprise. Cancers and all those diseases started to fly around. 10 out of 10 work, US government. Deep sleep therapy. Are you depressed? Well, not anymore. With the all-new deep sleep therapy, you get to sleep your sadness away and feel like a happy person again when you wake up. This experiment was done back in the 1960s, and it was advertised to cure whatever mental health condition you have. Bipolar? Gone. Anxiety? You're now confident. Schizophrenia? No more voices.
Can you at least give me some credit for it? I created that.
You do realize what this video's about, right? It's scientific experiments gone wrong, but if you insist, here goes your credit.
Oh, no, hide my name from it. Please?
No. You wanted this, so here you go. I'm actually impressed you wanted to take credit for something as disastrous as your program. Talk about commitment, dang. Now I want to know what is it you think I'm talking about that you want your credit so much. So, yeah, Dr. Harry Bailey created this experiment where he'll put patients to deep sleep, hence the name, like in a coma for a very long time that oversleeping is an understatement. You get injected with so many antipsychotic drugs that you'll be asleep for weeks on end. Dr. Bailey believed that the longer you sleep, the better you'll be mentally. At least, that's the gist of that. At first, it worked. Patients became happier after the deep sleep therapy, and it definitely boosted Dr. Bailey's ego that he wanted to advertise it to the whole world. But it's still an experiment, and it was only when it got popular that it proved to be a not-so-good anti-depression cure. The problem here was the solution itself. See, when a person is unconscious for that long, the brain thinks of two things. 1, you're dead, or 2, you're in a coma. So it would tell the rest of your body to act the part and not move. That much time without moving and blot clots will say hi to you, then you'll have to train your legs to walk again after that time off not being in use. Another thing is this barbarian thing that's injected in you in large amounts. What it does is this. You have your brain, everything there does its own parts. Then you have your spinal cord, it makes you move. Barbiturates in large doses restricts the function of these two, and it will give you breathing problems, and more breathing problems, plus you're weaker overall. What a horrible exchange for a little peace and quiet up in the head, and that's not even the end of it. Some patients had memory loss when they woke up right after the session. But that was understandable, considering it was like a welcome back to the land of the living moment for them. Some of these cases were irreversible though. I'm telling you, some of the patients came out in worse conditions compared to before they got in and had the treatment. This one's for you, Dr. Bailey. Due to this awesome doctor's malpractice and negligence, some patients died, and the main reason was the deep sleep experiment. Let me give you one actual thing, because you might think I'm just yapping pure air here with no actual information. So 24 patients died because of the deep sleep at Chelmsford Hospital. And when it was investigated, people found out that Bailey and friends didn't give two flying ducks about the risks of their little experiment, so they just did the process to the patients, and they were supervised by, drumroll please, no one. In fact, these patients didn't even sign a proper consent to it, because no one would agree to being a guinea pig in something as bad as this. That's why the Bailey bunch made it look like it already works. How's that for a credit, Dr. Bailey? Chester Southam theory. Hey Dr. Bailey, you have another dude joining the credit list. I'm not downplaying what Bailey did to people who just wanted to have a better mental health, but Chester M. Southam, a virologist and cancer researcher in the 50s, straight up just chucked cancers into people as part of a study. As a part of a freaking study. He did this experiment to see if the immune system can reject cancer cells and if cancer can be contagious. By today's medical standards, this is ridiculously alarming. I need Dr. Mike to piggyback on this one. Can somebody call him? Anyone? No? Oh. Okay. Dr. Southam started the experiment by injecting HeLa cells and immortal cancer cell to cancer patients at Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research. That was a long-ass name for a hospital.
Thank you so much for explaining what immortal cells are. I'm really educated.
You know, you keep appearing out of nowhere with the most random and most sarcastic side comments ever. I'm gonna give you a name. From now on, you're Hoopla. To answer your question, immortal cancer cells, like HeLa, is like this group of cells that are cancer. These kinds of cells are grown in labs and they don't die. They multiply. They clone themselves infinitely for as long as they live. Want to try putting it in your body?
Nah, I'm good.
Then sit down and listen.
All right, I will. You didn't have to be so mean about it.
So Southam injected it into patients who used to have cancer at that hospital and thought that if they had cancer in the past, then that means their bodies now know what these cancer cells look like and beat the crap out of it. Then some writing on the paper. The thought was great, don't get me wrong, but it's a different story when you start doing a stabby, the needly inside healthy people's bodies without them knowing and without their permission. Dr. Southam did it to the prisoners of Ohio State Penitentiary and patients at Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital in Brooklyn. He did this now because he wanted to see how the immune system of healthy people would react to these cells compared to those who have or had cancer. Knock knock. Who's there? It's tumor, says the cancer cell that turned into a tumor because they weren't supposed to be handled that way, and now they're mad, so they made bumps where they were inserted. Some got even madder and moved locations before making a bump. Just imagine if that tumor went to the brain. Congratulations, you now have a body count. Things went south for Southam when the Jewish doctors in that Jew hospital reported him to the board of people who definitely know what they're doing because they're wearing long coats and glasses. So, investigation started, yada yada yada, and they saw that Chester M. Southam actually didn't inform the healthy patients that they were getting cancer and the risks of it. In 1965, the board of people who definitely know what they're doing because they're wearing long coats and glasses gave Southam's license a 1-year detention. Dude actually pulled a Dr. Bailey move with cancer. Project QK Hilltop. So this was done during the Cold War. You know, that one war, that's cold. Nah, Cold War was a silent war to see who's better between the two superpower countries, while the other country was made up of more countries, but was made to look like one, because the Kremlin wasn't taking any of it. QK Hilltop was made by the CIA to know if mind control was possible and if anyone can be turned into Professor X and go wah 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 in someone's brain. The researchers used things like LSD on experimenting. As per what I see, it started with a bunch of tests on volunteers that you're not really sure were volunteers or people that were dragged to Area 51 or something. And the first results were actually not that bad. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's because it's every single thing on this list. Worked well the first time and never again. The quote-unquote volunteers showed some consciousness above an average human, improved body functions, and increased mind power. CIA was definitely building the X-Men right under our noses. You can't prove me wrong. Or right. Well, it didn't take long for CIA to go the distance and do something that's off the book. After that, they upped the testing conditions using things like electroconvulsive therapy, which is the scarier term for a brain shock, sensory deprivation, where you go float in water without light or sound, and hypnosis, more often without any consent. They're CIA, they don't need one. Ask for consent, and you probably will be an Area 51 resident. And as you would expect, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Their subjects started to getting schizophrenic, paranoid, and super anxious. But again, what can they do? It's CIA. Time went on, and there was this one subject that got so stoned, cracked, high, and awakened by so much LSD, he became so aggressive and violent. The team ended up tranquilizing him regularly, but that was damage control at that point. And it just totally went to chaos when a lot of their subject had permanent and incurable mental health issues that some even spent their lives in mental facilities because of what they got from the project. Frankenweenie. If you've seen that movie, this was the real-life version of it. This experiment meant they revived dogs that were already called dead at clinics, and this was made by a Soviet scientist named Sergei.
Sergey what?
I'm not saying that last name. It's spelled like this, and if I said that, I'd have a stroke. I'm only capable of saying names like Smith or Jones or Miller or whatever. But this? No thanks. I'd rather sing Erica. So Dr. Sergei used a machine called the auto-jector. It sounds scary, but you gotta understand that almost everything is scary when it's Russian, but it was just the first version of the heart-lung machine. It pumps blood and oxygen and make it go round the body of the dead dogs. He would chop the head of the dog off and put some anesthesia, then the auto-jector would start its work. Like everything else, it worked at the start. Just the start. The dogs were showing that they were alive by blinking and twitching and all that. Okay, good. Some brain pumping is working, and they thought anything could be revived with the auto-jector, but the dogs weren't exactly alive, if you think about it. They just, well, moved. Even the brain activity was just little, and the dogs were not aware that they were doing the blinking and twitching. It was all in the reflexes. The worst thing was, these dogs did the experiment many times. I mean, just let the dog rest in peace, Bryukonenko. Oh dang, I said the name. But this experiment happened in the 1940s, and well, to your surprise, medicine wasn't as advanced then compared today. So they basically just gave the dogs some movement. They weren't alive, and Dr. Bryukonenko just opted that once dead, it's dead. The Tuskegee syphilis study.
What's a syphilis?
Something that's deadly and something you'll never get because you don't pull anyone. The Tuskegee syphilis study was done sometime between 1932 and 1972 by the USPHS, and it was done to see how syphilis thrives when it's not treated. But that's not what the subjects were told. The 600 African-American men that the USPHS took were separated. 399 of these men had syphilis, and 201 did not have it. Hey guys, so welcome to this free healthcare provided by the US government. You should really thank the presidents from Herbert Hoover to Richard Nixon for doing this for completely free to treat bad blood. Please be reminded that we did not specifically choose your race because you're black and poor and illiterate. We're not racist because we have poor black friends that did not study too. It's actually because of, it's because we couldn't find any white people in this area. But don't worry, we have white subjects in other places that were doing this study. Enjoy being a healthy person. Wow. Just wow. There's a high chance that the agents of USPHS actually said that because of how racist USA was at that time. But the subjects bought it, and the study took off with the subjects thinking that it's still a free medical exam with meals and burial insurance. The year 1940 came, and penicillin got out. This was the most effective cure for syphilis at that time, but the Public Health Service denied their studies the use of it on purpose.
So the idea was they basically let the people die for information? Were these people just numbers for them?
That's where you're wrong. The USPHS didn't see them as numbers. They saw them as poor black people that they can play the lives of. USA looked up to numbers so much during that time, ever since they recovered from the Great Depression, that their subjects were lower than numbers. Lo and behold, the men got worse conditions, as syphilis is something that affects this, and this. Even when the men's health got so bad, USPHS was still like, don't touch them, this is for research, until they died. When they died, some deeper research found out that even the wives of these men got syphilis too, and gave birth to the children with syphilis as well. When this former employee of the service leaked the news to the press in 1972, everyone was on fire, and after a lawsuit was filed, the families of each subject got $10 million. But once again, that was damage control. The bottom line reason for this was actually just racism, nothing else. Chernobyl disaster, 1986.